Now, when it comes to less than ideal SpongeBob episodes, there's a kind of disappointment that keeps coming back. I wouldn't call it outright bad. I mean, bad is obvious. I'm talking about watching something good and then stop being good. Like the first 4 minutes in, the episode is cooking. The premise is fresh, the setup is tight, you're leaning forward a little because you can feel where this could go, and then the episode goes somewhere else. For whatever reason. Don't get me wrong, some of that second half is fine, it's watchable, but you still spend the whole back half thinking about the episode you could have gotten instead. And then some would go so far the other way to the point you'd think, who in the hell would approve this? Who looked at a perfectly good plot, threw it out, and put the exact opposite in its place? Which, sadly, they've done it more than once. I think we best start with the Fry Cook games from season 2. Whoa. But before some of you get mad, let me just say, the Fry Cook games is not a bad episode by any metrics. It's not. It's really good. It's one of the strong lineups in season 2. That's not even arguable. That being said, I still think this is a wasted opportunity. See, the episode starts with the Krusty Krab putting SpongeBob to represent them in the annual Fry Cook Games, where all the Fry Cooks in Bikini Bottom would compete in a fast food themed athletic competition to prove who's the best in town. But then Patrick joins the Chum Bucket out of pure spite after having an argument with SpongeBob, which would grow into the two of them beating each other up in front of a packed stadium. And the whole thing resolves because their pants ripped and it turns out they were each wearing the other guy's color. That's a really iconic ending. I don't have any issues with that. I'm touching the middle area because here's the thing about the Fry Cook Games. It's called the Fry Cook Games, right? It's an Olympics for fry cooks. It gives us a torch ceremony, a coliseum, a story about crabs and plankton as veteran competitors with a whole history of medals between them. And then when it comes to the actual competition, what we actually get is a deep fry pole vault, a chocolate high dive, and bun wrestling as the final. Then a few montages in between, but it's not more than just a few seconds. The first game between SpongeBob and Patrick itself doesn't even start until 7 minutes in an 11-minute episode. Every other event in this Olympics happens in a montage that's finished before you can realize what you're looking at. What I'm trying to say is, just when the competition starts getting good and really interesting after the first two, we already get to the final. It was even more disappointing because the episode is so good at hyping the rivalry up. They spend a good few minutes talking down to each other about the competition ahead.
Now get out there and win that medal!
It would be amazing if we could see at least 5 competitions maybe before getting to the final. In fact, I personally think this is one of the best plots to make a 30-minute special episode, instead of something like a sponge who could fly. I mean, those first minute stadium shots already feel like a special, wouldn't you agree? However, at the end of the day, I do get it. It's an 11-minute episode. You've got to explain the games, get Patrick to the Chum Bucket, escalate the rivalry, and land the ending. Something has to be a montage. This is also why I'm putting this one at the bottom of the ladder. They just ran out of room instead of making bad decisions. Hold on to that phrase though, because the rest are not so innocent. Now, let's jump 21 years to an episode called Food Pabooft Truck. One day, Mr. Krabs notices there are people who won't come to the Krusty Krab because they didn't want to move even an inch.
Not quite as good as a Krabby Patty, but I didn't have to move 1 inch.
So he buys a beat-up food truck and tells SpongeBob and Squidward to get some sales in town, and they don't get to come home until they've sold a patty. And then the episode does something I didn't see coming. It gives them competition. The city is loaded with other food trucks, and these guys are ruthless. Every time SpongeBob and Squidward find a spot with a customer in it, somebody bigger shoves them out of it to protect their own turf.
Hey, you claim jumpers! This is my turn!
See, these are the things I find really refreshing. I mean, we know the Krusty Krab is selling pretty good most of the time because they have the best tasting burgers in town, but we don't get that many episodes with competitors in it, outside of Plankton, of course. The big name of the Krabby Patty didn't help in marketing because people think, well, there's a place for it. When you're buying off a truck, you're looking for something you can't get anywhere else. It's fun to see Krab's garbage trucks have to face an entire entire ecosystem of better ones. People that know how to sell their food even though they don't have the best taste, by monopolizing the turf, practically eliminating the competitors. It even raises the stakes for them too. Either you sell one patty, or you sleep in the truck. You might even get pizza delivery energy from this episode, but instead of trying to find their way back to civilization, they had to find a smart way to sell these patties. And then about a third of the way in, they drive to rock bottom, and every one of those food trucks disappears from the episode, which made the turf war stop existing. Again, it's not bad, it's fine. The rock bottom half is decent. At first they saw the place is really empty, except there's one red anglerfish who looks like he's waving them over. They burn the whole back half chasing him, and it turns out he was just airing out his armpits. And the reason the whole place is deserted is that every rock bottomite is on a bus coming home from their annual trip to the Krusty Krab. That's a good joke. That's genuinely a good joke. But I just wish it's a good joke in a different episode. I wish they would stop and think and develop a smarter way to resolve this whole food truck rivalry by making SpongeBob and Squidward stay in the town and compete in their own funny way. You know, like something from Patty Hype. They had the room to go that path, but instead they spent it on the safer options by sticking to the title card. It's truly a wasted opportunity. But still, it's not a bad episode, and I would be fine with it, unlike the next episode we're going to talk about, because now I start losing patience. Squid on a Bus is from season 12. The story begins with Squidward waiting for the bus to work, but the bus shows up late. Then, of course, he spends the whole ride by being an ass to the driver, criticizing the hygiene, and sort of backseat driving him. So when they finally pull up at the Krusty Krab, he says this:
I could do your job better than you ever could.
Yeah? Well, I could do your job better than you ever could.
And so they did switch jobs. The bus driver takes the register, Squidward takes the wheel. Now, at this very point, the setup is really interesting for two things. One is that you don't often get to see a Bikini Bottomite actually back up their words with action. More often than not, they would just say stupid things out and gone. Second is that this decision creates two plots at once. The first would be about Squidward driving the bus alone, discovering that a job he mocked is actually hard, and maybe learning lessons. You know, about Squidward's contempt meeting reality and reality winning. Two, a stranger. Somebody we have never met standing behind the Krusty Krab register with SpongeBob in the kitchen, which means SpongeBob has a brand new person to inflict himself upon, and we get to watch someone who isn't Squidward find out what that's like. It's an A-plot, a B-plot kind of story, caused by one bet inside the first 2 minutes. That's really good. Until SpongeBob gets on the bus.
Beautiful day. Hi.
And from that point on, you know what the rest of the episode would look like. SpongeBob and Patrick get on the bus and annoy Squidward for the rest of the 8 minutes. They swing off the ceiling, they act like animals. SpongeBob would jam a pillow under the brake pedal just to mess with them, to the point Squidward gets up from the driver's seat while the bus is moving to go throw them off. And the bus crashes into a trench. Yeah, it just turned into another Squidward's torture plot. The single most hated plot in the entire series, where every time Squidward wants a thing, SpongeBob and Patrick would come and ruin the thing. And the bus driver? He gets one beat near the end. He's overwhelmed, gets fed up, and quits on the spot. And Squidward gets his old job back.
That settles it. I quit everything!
I mean, no wonder he couldn't get a single order done. Nobody's cooking in the back. The guy who's supposed to be cooking just wanders off to another stupid adventure. Krabs also was not helped by just standing there crossing his claws. This episode went to the trouble of inventing a setup by having a job swap, a separation of the plot to give a room for SpongeBob and Squidward away from each other. And then it sends SpongeBob straight back to Squidward anyway and spends the rest of its runtime with stupid torture, practically destroying the setup it just built. Fry Cook Games just ran out of space. Food Truck spent their space questionably, but this one made the space and then refused to use it for whatever reason. It feels like they intentionally lulled us into thinking, oh, Oh, finally a non-Squidward torture episode, just to get back at us saying, gotcha, it was not. This is another torture episode all along. Like, just why? But then, as frustrating as that is, at least the story is straightforward, unlike the next one, which is a little confusing, to say the least. All of this started with huge ads on television. The Great Patty Caper was an event, a half-hour special for November 2010, promoted under the tagline, Mystery with a Twistery. And I guess it worked. 6.1 million people watched it. Most watched thing on cable that week that wasn't a football game. The rough story is that one day, neither Krabs nor SpongeBob can remember the Krabby Patty formula off the top of their heads. So they decided to open the formula bottle to look it up. But Plankton is here again to steal it. At this point, Krabs is so fed up with protecting the formula, so he decided to send the formula to get locked up in a vault on the other side of the ocean. All goes well until they remember,
Oh no, we forgot to look at the...
Formula, yeah.
So SpongeBob has to take a train across the ocean to go fetch it, with Patrick of course. But Plankton got his ears on this news and decided to follow them, hoping to steal the recipe himself. Naturally, SpongeBob was also carrying the only key to open the vault, but thanks to some incident in the dining car, he lost the key. They also met with Plankton and immediately search him, but he's clean, which means someone else has the key. So now we have a locked room mystery on a train. Then SpongeBob manages to bring the police to this mystery, where they would question all the suspects in the promos. A butler, a woman in a dress, and a mother with her baby. However, every single one of SpongeBob's accusations turns out to be true. They're all criminals, just not for stealing the key. The mother in disguise was a triplets gang guilty of stealing Neptune's jewelry. The butler turns out to be a sandwich counterfeiter, and the lady in the dress didn't do a thing. I don't know, they never question her anyway. So, who took the key? Patrick! It was in SpongeBob's pants the whole time, until Patrick took it out to clean them after the accident. Right, except we never see that very accident. We never saw SpongeBob dirtying his pants and had Patrick clean it. Now, that's not a twist. That is the opposite of a twist. A twist is when the answer was in front of you and you didn't see it. But this one, the answer was never in front of you at all, because it happened off screen, to a character with no motive, for no reason. There is no version of watching this episode where you could have solved it. If anything, the twist is that there's no mystery after all. And it gets better because once the key business is over, there's still about 10 minutes of special left and no more mysteries to solve. So Plankton steals the key, disconnects half the train, and it becomes a runaway train chase. Patrick breaks the brakes, then Patrick breaks the throttle. It crashes into the bank. They promised an entire genre, with little to no intention of delivering on it. You know, I got a suspicion that it's either they made those very ads way before the episode was actually finished, or they were made to clickbait us on purpose. Yeah, whatever it was, you managed to disappoint a lot of kids and a lot of adults watching Patty Caper Nickelodeon. Then again, if you really think about it, I don't think this episode deserved to be a 22-minute special in the first place. Barely anything happens here. You could compress the whole thing down to a regular 11 minutes and still not lose an important plot beat. If there is one, anyway. But still, that was still tame compared to the last episode we're going to talk about, because that one I can't defend at all. It's the infamous A Pal for Gary. Now, I bet most of you know really well about this episode, or its reputation. It sits somewhere around a 3.2 on IMDb, which makes it, depending on the day you check, one of the lowest rated episodes of SpongeBob ever made. And not only is it a mean-spirited episode, they also somehow managed to waste a perfectly good plot on the way there. So it opens with SpongeBob realizing that his work schedule is costing Gary something. That he walks out every morning and Gary sits in that house alone all day.
Sorry, buddy, I don't have time for a walk right now.
And that isn't fair to him. Aw, that's really heartbreaking, you know? That's SpongeBob's love for Job and love for Gary in actual conflict. It's also very similar to a tearjerker episode like Have You Seen This Snail?, the best Gary episode this show ever made. It gets sadder when SpongeBob sees a customer who does manage to find time to spend with his worm pet, and he can't. He feels really bad now. Until you see, Gary doesn't really care about it anyway. He's perfectly happy doing his own thing all day. And so, I don't really feel so bad anymore because I already know. This episode isn't going to be about a heartwarming story. This whole misunderstanding is only ever going to be a funny episode at best, which unfortunately it also isn't. Because SpongeBob decides to go to the pet store and get Gary a pal, just like the title said.
Oh, Dad, is it really mine to keep?
He picks up Puffy Fluffy, which the shop owner warns him about. This is not a cute regular pet, she said. It's a monster. And the rest of the episode is Puffy Fluffy trying to eat Gary whenever SpongeBob leaves the room. And SpongeBob coming back, seeing the wreckage, and blaming Gary again and again. Even towards the end, Puffy Fluffy has fully transformed into a monster and manages to put SpongeBob in its mouth, which then Gary has to save SpongeBob's life, and SpongeBob turns around and says,
Harry, what do you have to say for yourself?
Like, I don't need to tell you that's bad. It's a mean-spirited episode towards Gary, and a confusing one at that. See, beyond cruel, SpongeBob feels like two different people across this episode. At first, he's kind enough to feel guilty about Gary being lonely. Then, he turns into a toxic person who scolds Gary every time he can't get along with Fluffy, without ever asking for an explanation, and then asks him to explain himself after the chaos, as if any of it was his fault. What happened, man? You turned bipolar or something? It's also the reason why the second half hurts so bad, because it feels like betrayal. If they'd opened with SpongeBob already being a toxic person, not caring about playing with Gary, and instead just buying a weird pet that ended up being chaos incarnate, it would be more reasonable. Not that it'd be good, mind you, but at least it becomes a forgettable episode. Instead, they built a genuine emotional beat and then spent 9 minutes breaking it. Though I understand that the idea for this plot was a parody to an old-school comedy horror called Gremlins from 1984, where they had a furry little creature called Mogwai that would turn into a cold-blooded killer if you mistreated him, such as feeding it after midnight. Then again, it doesn't work in SpongeBob's case, since the tone and the plot was misleading all over the place. Do you want it to be horror? Well, maybe treated it like I Was a Teenage Gary. You wanted it to be a sad story. Well, you could turn this to be the opposite of Dumped, where Gary is the one chasing SpongeBob for his companionship. But no, if there's anything I remember vividly from this episode, it's that SpongeBob is a toxic owner who likes to gaslight his pet Gary. And I don't like that. At the end, they all leave the same lessons behind. There's a whole version of SpongeBob that exists in the first 4 minutes of 100 different episodes and absolutely nowhere else. The food truck war, the train mystery, Squidward on a bus, alone, for once in his life, and a sponge who loves his snail enough to worry about him. I think about that show a lot. But what's yours? What's the episode where you watched the first half and you already knew, they were about to blow it? Tell me down there.
So apparently, SpongeBob is somewhere around his early 30s. I mean, he's a grown adult man after all. He lives alone, holds down a steady job, pays his own bills, and yet this is also the same guy who had an emotional breakdown at his grandma's house because she stopped giving him cookies. Now look, SpongeBob has always been what you'd call an adult kid, right? A man-child. However, you'd also know that the adult part is doing a lot of the heavy lifting here. Because, unfortunately, SpongeBob acts more than just childish sometimes. But I guess since the word childish itself is pretty broad, the question is, what kind of childish are we actually talking about? And if we're looking back to the show, there's a version of childish that's genuinely charming, even heartwarming. And then there's a version that's just embarrassing to even look at. And then there's a third version, one that easily becomes a disaster when you carry it too far. So, fortunately, more often than not, SpongeBob has a good childish side. In fact, I think this is what made us fall in love with the show in the first place. And one of the best examples I can give you is Idiot Box from Season 3. The whole story is pretty simple. One day, SpongeBob and Patrick order a giant TV just to get the box it came in. And Squidward, who sees them doing this from his window, he thinks they're idiots.
Just when I thought they couldn't get any stupider.
Because, of course, what kind of normal adults would do that? But then he starts hearing all these sounds coming from the box. Mountain climbing, explosions, robot battles, and every time he opens it to check, there's nothing inside. Just two friends sitting inside a cardboard box. The rest of the episode is basically Squidward losing his mind, trying to figure out how they're doing it. However, the real trick behind all that noise is that they're just imagining it. That's it.
Not as long as we have our imagination.
They're just two grown men sitting in a box, completely committed to whatever world they've decided exists in there. There are no tricks, no gimmicks. And now Squidward is the one who looks ridiculous by the end, because he kept trying to force his brand of logic into something that was never about logic. SpongeBob and Patrick didn't need a real spaceship or a real racetrack, they just needed to believe it hard enough. More than that, I think there's something actually kind of profound about Idiot Box. Most adults, like Squidward, spend so much energy trying to be seen as serious. We're trying to have the right opinions, the right hobbies, the right reactions to things, to the point where we completely forget how to just play. Luckily, SpongeBob never had that problem. He never needed permission to enjoy something just as it is. Now, Secret Box still has the same energy. The difference is that it feels a little bit more personal. The story here is that Patrick has a box, and because he can't stop giggling while holding said box, it takes no time for SpongeBob to get curious about what's inside. But Patrick just says no every single time because, well, it's his secret after all. Even though he's clearly gaslighting SpongeBob to be curious about it. So SpongeBob takes the bait and spends the entire runtime completely consumed by this secret box. He tried trading his own secret with Patrick, taking it by force, and the worst of all, breaking into Patrick's rock at night just to have a peek at the box. And what's inside? It's just a string. Nothing. But not really. Patrick did reveal later on that it hides an embarrassing photo of SpongeBob making a stupid face at a Christmas party, and that's it. It's pretty clear that Patrick had planned to do this all along. Like, yeah, he just wanted to rage bait SpongeBob for the whole day because why not? It's not like he'd have anything better to do anyway. However, as bad as the breaking into your friend's house was, I don't think SpongeBob really overreacted. I mean, you can't blame someone for being curious after you gaslight him, just the way that a kid is curious. And I'm sure that most of us have been there as a kid. You just had that one door you really, really want to open, especially if your friends wouldn't stop bragging about it the whole day. Too bad SpongeBob just never learned to pretend he didn't care. These two episodes are basically the core idea for what SpongeBob's childishness is supposed to be, about being so genuinely invested in small things that the whole world feels bigger because of it. Now, those are the obvious picks for the good ones, but his childishness isn't always that simple. Rockabye Bivalve and Nature Pants are technically still in the same neighborhood, but there's something slightly different going on. Nature Pants is the one where SpongeBob just quits his entire life to go live among the jellyfish. He gives up his house, his job, his friends, because he just decides he belongs in the wild now. And as brave or wholesome as SpongeBob's decision is, I think it's childish. I mean, he clearly doesn't know what to expect. He just did that because it feels fun and freeing to do. Meanwhile, Rockabye Bivalve is SpongeBob and Patrick finding a random baby scallop on the street, and they think, let's be parents. Again, that part is wholesome, even exemplary for kids, right? Found some stray animals and cared for them. But the whole domestic situation, where SpongeBob is the overworked mom and Patrick is the deadbeat dad, they're completely taking things the wrong way.
Oh, yeah, you're working. If that's the kind of work you're doing, show me where to sign up.
Is it childish? Yes, especially if you understand that bad parents could easily come from a childish adult kind of situation. They're still thinking about themselves first rather than about their families. With that being said, every single one of those stories ends in happiness. Everyone learned a huge life lesson at the end, so at least there's that. But our investment in fun could easily shift into something more dangerous, because the next kind of childish is a lot harder to watch with a straight face. As obvious as it sounds, being childish could turn into embarrassing moments, even more so with lots of people watching you do it. And no episode captures that better than Grandma's Kisses from Season 2. Now, the setup is that SpongeBob's grandma drops him off at the Krusty Krab for work, and as a parting gift, she kisses him on the forehead in front of everyone. Because why not? There's nothing quite like your grandma's kisses. And Squidward, being Squidward, makes a big deal of it, because he loves getting back at SpongeBob whenever possible. However, Squidward actually manages to get the whole restaurant to laugh at him. SpongeBob immediately cries, of course. I mean, there's just so much a man could handle, so he goes running home out of embarrassment. Not only that, he goes to Patrick for advice, which is already a bit questionable on SpongeBob's side. And wouldn't you know it, Patrick said that SpongeBob should finally start acting like a man.
You're a man now, SpongeBob, and it's time you started acting like one.
He was even kind enough to show SpongeBob how. Now, SpongeBob takes all of this completely seriously. They both show up to Grandma's house wearing fake sideburns, refusing cookies, and even refusing Grandma kisses. And Grandma actually plays along with these grown-up acts. She stops treating SpongeBob like a baby, gives him a book on routine active maintenance instead of cookies, and now SpongeBob has to sit there watching Patrick, enjoying everything he gave up. So now, it's about time for him to drop the act. And if anything, this episode is genuinely honest about something. SpongeBob doesn't want to grow up, and yet he knows he's supposed to. He knows people are laughing at him for it, and he still can't do it. Beneath all the trophies for the best fry cook in town is just a guy who really misses his grandma's cookies. I think this is what most young adults experience somewhere in their early work years, especially men. I mean, SpongeBob isn't wrong for wanting to be childlike, especially around someone we hold very dear to us like our grandma. It's a really nice feeling to have, whether you want to admit it or not. It's just that if you do it in front of others, they could make fun of you, which is a mistake on their part and not SpongeBob's. Luckily, SpongeBob learned to balance these things in the end.
You can kiss your grandma and still be an adult.
He realized that you could still do both, just in their own places. Even though Squidward and half the Krusty Krab apparently followed him to his grandma's house just to keep laughing at him through the window, which, honestly, that's a whole other problem, but so what? Haters gonna hate. Now, Muscle Bob, Buff Pants, No Weenies Allowed, and I Had an Accident all live in this same territory. And honestly, if you line them up together, they're basically telling the same story in 3 different ways. The story being, SpongeBob has an insecurity, SpongeBob refuses to just sit with it, and SpongeBob makes everything dramatically worse as a result. Muscle Bob Buff Pants is the most straightforward version of that.
Howdy, SpongeBob. How's it going? Not too close, Sandy. I tend to get smelly when I'm pumping iron. Check it out.
A sponge is not known for its muscle. Everybody knows that. But that's alright. Sandy is more than willing to teach him her workout program if he just shows up at her dome at 5 a.m. It's all gonna be great. But SpongeBob soon realizes maybe the gym bro's life isn't really for him.
It's time for the arm cruncher. This squirrel's trying to kill me.
So instead of pushing himself through years of sore muscles and dry chicken breast, he orders inflatable muscle arms from TV and just straps them on. And for a brief, glorious moment, it works. Everyone is impressed, at least by the looks of it. SpongeBob feels incredible, and he could pretend to be the strong guy he always wanted to be. But when it comes to actual weightlifting, well, they're just balloons. They won't even help lift a glass of water, no matter how hard you force it. So you can imagine what would happen when SpongeBob tries them for a big-ass anchor throwing competition. However, the reason SpongeBob is childish in this episode isn't because of the plan itself, it's the whole logic behind it. A kid doesn't really think 2 steps ahead, at least most of them. A kid sees a problem, then they would try to find the quickest solution and commit to it completely without considering what happens next, just like SpongeBob does here. He just thought about how good it would feel to walk in there looking strong. That was the whole plan. However, it pains me to say there are also lots of adults who experience these kinds of situations in real life. I know a few of them, maybe even myself sometimes. You made the exaggerated claims to sound cool, and everybody believes it, and it's ready to take it further, so you gotta fake it till you make it, right? It's still a bad decision, though. Meanwhile, No Weenies Allowed takes that same impulse and stretches it across the entire episode. Now, the setup here is that there's a bar called the Salty Spittoon, the roughest, toughest joint in the 7 Seas, and SpongeBob can't get in. There's also this bouncer named Reg who keeps turning him away because he said SpongeBob just doesn't look the part.
I'll have you know, I stubbed my toe last week while watering my spice garden, and I only cried for 20 minutes.
And SpongeBob, rather than accepting this and just moving on with life, decides he needs to get in now, whatever it takes. So he tries to force his way in. Clearly that doesn't work. He tries to bluff his way in with new hair. That doesn't work. He eventually convinces Patrick to fake a fight with him in front of the bouncer to prove that he's tough enough. Well, the fake fight goes so well that SpongeBob gets the pass, only to slip on an ice cube at the entrance and end up in the hospital. Weenie Hut General. But here's the thing, SpongeBob doesn't need to be in the Salty Spittoon. There's nothing in there for him. The only reason he wanted in was because someone told him he couldn't. That's it. Just like a child hearing, "You can't do that," and doing it anyway, because they don't like the rejection part itself. SpongeBob spent an entire day planning an increasingly elaborate scheme to get into a bar he had no business being in, purely on principle. As for I Had an Accident, this is where the whole thing tips into something almost philosophical. So one evening, SpongeBob cracks his rear end while sandboarding. The doctor tells him one more injury and he'll end up in an iron butt, which is exactly as horrible as it sounds. And SpongeBob, driven by that fear, decided that he is done with the outside world, permanently. What's funny is that he adapts incredibly quickly. He makes friends with a chip, a penny, and a piece of tissue, and he is genuinely content with it, at least by the look of it. But Sandy and Patrick say, no, that can't be healthy. So they try to lure him back outside using increasingly desperate schemes, which ends up with the famous gorilla suit ending scene.
This is exactly the kind of thing I was talking about.
And look, one could say that this is just avoidance taken to a cartoonish extreme. But on the other hand, there's something almost admirable about how fully SpongeBob commits to his bad decision, like the inability to sit with discomfort and do something with it. I mean, most adults will at least feel guilty about avoiding something, but not SpongeBob. Something scary happened, so the world is now the problem. And staying away from the world is the solution, which is, again, exactly how a kid processes a bad experience. All these episodes are still funny and memorable. To be honest, I'd never imagined myself one day sitting here and analyzing SpongeBob step by step to cope with his problem. But here we are. But now we're getting to the third kind, the one that stopped being funny because SpongeBob just took it too far. However, I want to be careful about how I say this, because there's a real difference between SpongeBob being childlike and SpongeBob being written like the writers forgot he was supposed to have a functioning brain. The first one is a character trait, the second one is a writing problem. And A Pal for Gary from Season 7 is probably the clearest place where you can see exactly where that line gets crossed. The episode is that SpongeBob feels guilty leaving Gary alone at home while he is off at work, which is pretty sweet, right? Like, he's being thoughtful for Gary. So he adopts a second pet, this nudibranch thing called Puffy Fluffy, to keep Gary company while he's away. The problem is that Puffy Fluffy is not a domestic kind of animal, to say the least. From the moment SpongeBob brings it home, Puffy Fluffy makes it extremely clear that he doesn't want to be friendly. I mean, even the woman selling it to SpongeBob warns him directly. Gary also takes one look at it and wants nothing to do with it. And yet, SpongeBob sees all this, he hears all the noises, he walks past the destruction, he watches Gary fighting for his life in that library, only to say this.
Well, Gary, what do you have to say for yourself?
The biggest difference here is that in Idiot Box, or even in I Had an Accident, the only person inconvenienced by his bad decision was SpongeBob himself. But in A Pal for Gary, someone other than him is genuinely getting hurt, and SpongeBob keeps choosing not to see it, whether he's pretending or not. And I think that's the thing that actually bothers me the most, that sometimes his childishness doesn't have any consequences for him personally. In the previous example, when SpongeBob got something wrong, it landed on him. He was the one crying on the floor. He was the one in the hospital. He was the one who got humiliated in front of everyone. But here, Gary pays the price for whatever reason, and SpongeBob walks away having learned absolutely nothing. Now, some of you might argue that this was closer to a neglectful parents kind of situation rather than being childish, which isn't wrong. But I would also argue that neglectful parents can be viewed as acting in a childish manner in a psychological sense. It often stems from extreme emotional immaturity, narcissism, or just a focus solely on their own needs. Now, of course, I could keep listing more and more episodes where SpongeBob's being the most childish in a bad way. But then this video would just be comparing later seasons to the Golden Age again, so yeah, I think one episode is enough to make my point. I will say this though, the reason Idiot Box is so good is because SpongeBob's imagination means something. The reason Grandma's Kisses works is because SpongeBob's breakdown means something. Even the fake muscle arms and the salty spittoon, those had some great lessons, because underneath the stupidity, there's a real feeling driving it. Whether it's insecurity, fear, or even the desire just to be seen in a certain way. Take all that away, and all you have left is a guy who's making stupid random decisions. And even 11 minutes feels too long a time to watch just that. So yeah, childish is a pretty broad word when it comes to SpongeBob, because at its best, it's the whole reason the show works. There's something genuinely worth protecting in that. It's the whole refusal to fully let go of the part of you that finds wonder in the small things. But somewhere along the way, someone started mistaking childlike for incapable. And that's a smaller difference than it sounds, but it changes everything about how it feels to watch him. The charm was never really about him being childish, it was about him being honest, about the fact that what you saw was genuinely all there was. Just SpongeBob being fully present, completely committed to whatever small thing was in front of him. Honestly, we could all learn a thing or two from SpongeBob being childish in so many ways. There's one SpongeBob episode that fans think was a mistake. It's one of those episodes with altered personalities, and I personally kind of like it. But after watching it again, they might actually be right. This episode does something a little more dangerous than just giving Squidward everything he ever wanted. It flips the formula that made SpongeBob feel like SpongeBob. And whether the writers meant to or not, they accidentally revealed a truth most people were never supposed to notice. A truth about the show's emotional logic. And once you see it, you'll never look at these characters the same way again. So this is how things usually go in Bikini Bottom. Squidward is sleeping beautifully, meanwhile SpongeBob and Patrick, not sleeping. They're sitting on the side of his bed, waiting to watch the sunrise with Squidward at 3:47 a.m. And according to SpongeBob,
We come here every morning.
Squidward is understandably horrified. Although they've apparently broken into Squidward's house for every holiday too. There's even a memory book with one of them kissing Squidward on Valentine's Day with lipstick. That's definitely past the line of friendly, I suppose. And what's really messed up is SpongeBob and Patrick didn't see this as creepy. This is what they see as friendship, just zero boundaries. So after 3 hours worth of reasonable crash out from Squidward, he kicks them out. And by kicks them out, I mean he throws them over a fence using a picnic catapult. Then, just to make it crystal clear that he's had enough, he installs a high voltage electric fence around his house. So much for neighbors' trouble. But you know what's amazing about this? This technically still counts as a normal SpongeBob setup. This is how normal episodes usually go. SpongeBob and Patrick cause problems, Squidward suffers, and we all laugh because his pain is oddly satisfying, at least to some extent. At this point, we've seen this cycle play out dozens of times, so you'd expect the next scene to follow the same logic, right? Yeah, no. This episode drops the usual routine and decides to take a sharp turn. A weird one. Squidward zaps himself in trying to kick SpongeBob and Patrick out of the house. The zap is so lethal, it switches something in his brain. SpongeBob and Patrick actually looked concerned for once. They decide to leave Squidward alone right before he says the magic words.
Do they have cute seahorses there?
I don't know what kind of voltage that fence was pumping, but it basically rewired Squidward's brain. Suddenly, Squidward wants to go to the petting zoo. He's asking about scallops nibbling on fingers. He's in a wagon being pulled around town by SpongeBob and Patrick like he's their spoiled toddler. It feels weirdly good to see Squidward smiling and laughing while hugging them both. After 5 seasons worth of losing, this is the last thing I expected to see from Squidward. By the time they drop him off at home, he leans out the window like a sitcom finale. And SpongeBob realized it too. He said that Squidward actually feels happier. They're genuinely happy for him because finally, Squidward is willing to take part in the shenanigans and enjoy his time with them. It's wholesome and weird. It's almost like this could be the start of something new. But if you know this show, you also know that something always goes badly, because Squidward's sudden change is the first mistake. Come the next morning, the setup is reversed. Squidward is now in SpongeBob's room, waiting to watch the sunrise together. He honks SpongeBob awake like he's the foghorn alarm now. You know, the thing SpongeBob used to do to him. And from this point, things escalate fast. He shares a newspaper with SpongeBob, flosses SpongeBob's teeth, they even walk together very closely to work. Now Squidward is the neighbor without boundaries. This man has been fully changed. And SpongeBob is not the only one feeling that change. At Krusty Krab, Squidward gives out free hats to children, offers tartar sauce to customers, and asks every single person how their day is. Like, way too many times.
How are we today? Everything A-okay here?
Even Mr. Krabs gets concerned. Well, not by the kindness, but by the free stuff. That's the real danger in Krabs' eyes. But that's not the big issue here. The real issue here is Squidward's messing with the natural order of Bikini Bottom. Krusty Krabs runs on negativity, sarcasm, and SpongeBob's chaotic optimism bumping up against Squidward's lifelong hatred of everything. And now that Squidward's cheerful, there's no resistance or tension. Just a second SpongeBob, and Bikini Bottom doesn't know what to do with it, especially SpongeBob. At first, SpongeBob tries to be cool about it. Sure, Squidward's acting different. He's also smiling more, helping out, and giving free stuff. But that's fine. He's just being friendly, right? Well, not when Squidward starts showing up everywhere. In the pineapple, at the grill, right between SpongeBob and his Krabby Patty. Like physically wedging himself in. SpongeBob simply can't give away the title of best fry cook in town. In his mind, no one could make a Krabby Patty better than him. So he refuses any patties that come from Squidward's hands, or tentacles, saying that it took years of practice and Squidward will never be up to it. He's ready to toss them out until Mr. Krabs shows up like,
They look okay to me. You know, he might be as good a fry cook as you.
oof. And just like that, the jealousy began. He didn't like the new Squidward, because in an effort to simply perform at his job, Squidward unintentionally proves that he's a better employee than SpongeBob. Better at frying patties, better at handling customers, even better at decorating Krabby Patties. Squidward's just so much better now, he snatched the Employee of the Month award effortlessly. That's when SpongeBob realized the real threat behind the new Squidward. Because if Squidward is cheerful now, and helpful, and beloved by customers, then what's left for SpongeBob? Who is he if Squidward's better at being SpongeBob than he is? For SpongeBob, this whole drama is more about identity. And more than anything, it's about his place in the weird little triangle between him, Patrick, and Squidward. Spoiler alert, that triangle also got tilted. Patrick suddenly walks in with a surprise delivery for the Employee of the Month.
I wonder who it could be.
And SpongeBob? He just points to the crowd, where Squidward is being tossed into the air like a rock star. SpongeBob just realized his losses. There's nothing more he could do. He had to swallow the fact that he's no longer the favorite employee. He even helped Patrick rewrite the name on the cake. It's just painful. Later that night, SpongeBob's sitting alone at a party that was supposed to be his, just staring at his slice of cake like it personally betrayed him. And the cherry on top?
Pogo dancing with your best friend.
That's it. That's the line. SpongeBob snaps and says, maybe you can take my job and you can take my picture off the wall, but nobody goes pogo dancing with Patrick besides me. And then he continues with kicking Squidward from his own celebration party and resumes the pogo dance with Patrick. That's just mean, SpongeBob, and egotistic, if I'm being honest. There are only so many Squidward happy moments, and now you're the one taking one away. Squidward just can't win, man. But I also get the emotions from SpongeBob's side. Deep down, SpongeBob wasn't mad that Squidward was winning. He was only scared that the people he loved didn't need him anymore. He just couldn't help it. So yeah, Squidward leaves, heartbroken and quiet, and touches the electric gates one more time. One jolt to the brain, and the balance is restored. Or no, I guess, since SpongeBob and Patrick get zapped too. And in the biggest full circle twist of the episode, now the three of them are acting grumpy and miserable. That's pretty much the episode. You know what? I really hope they made a direct sequel to this episode. I would pay to see an episode with three of them dissing everybody. But yeah, this episode just ends there without any real conclusion or finale. This episode doesn't teach anyone how to grow, it doesn't reward Squidward for being different, it also doesn't punish SpongeBob for being insecure. It just shows what happens when the emotional structure of a show, or a friend group, changes. Before we talk about the mistake this episode made, let me get one thing straight. This isn't a bad episode. It's clever and funny, it has great pacing and an actual emotional arc. In fact, if you just look at the surface, this might seem like one of the more thoughtful post-movie episodes SpongeBob's had. It's also nice to see SpongeBob taste his own medicine sometimes. So why do some fans say it feels like a mistake? Simply put, because it broke a rule that the show usually doesn't touch: the emotional balance between SpongeBob, Patrick, and Squidward. You see, SpongeBob's character works because of contrast. SpongeBob is the sunshine, Squidward is the thundercloud, and Patrick is the enigma in between. SpongeBob's character feels brighter because there's someone at the other side of the scale, rolling their eyes and screaming, wishing it would all stop. Squidward. But you take Squidward's character away, and the triangle snaps. Now you've got two sunshines and one enigma. It just doesn't work. So guess what? Someone has to fill the miserable role. And in this case, it's SpongeBob. Like some ancient unwritten rule where one must suffer so the other can shine. Call it karma, call it narrative structure, call it Bikini Bottom's weird emotional physics engine. But it's just the way it works. Now, to be fair, this isn't the first time SpongeBob flipped the roles on us. The show's actually done it a few times in the past. Remember Opposite Day, when Squidward tricked SpongeBob to be his opposite so he could sell his house? Or something like The Two Faces of Squidward, where he becomes handsome, nice, and accidentally turns into a celebrity. The difference is that those episodes were either temporary disguise or just handsome privilege in action. The changes weren't genuine. But Breath of Fresh Squidward? It plays it completely straight. No one plays pretend. Both Squidward and SpongeBob genuinely did what they would have done in this situation. It also sparks a weird question. Is this what we wanted? Did we want Squidward to win if it meant watching SpongeBob being the grumpy one? Did we want him to be happy if it turned him into the same overbearing force we used to hate in SpongeBob? Maybe not. It also feels kinda wrong in a way. Because even though Squidward's smile was satisfying, it came at the cost of what makes Squidward relatable in the first place. Maybe the truth is, we want Squidward to win, only if he stays grumpy in the process. Unfortunately, this episode also served as proof that no matter how much Squidward wants to be happy, he can't. He still has to get tortured and grumpy to even out the scale. You can change the player, but you can't change the game. You can change everything in Bikini Bottom, but the rule will stay the same. It's somewhat poetic, I think. So yeah, everything resets, nobody wins, nobody learns. But somehow, that's what makes it feel like classic SpongeBob again. Because roles matter, even if we don't realize why. So next time you're watching SpongeBob goof off while Squidward yells from inside a bubble bath, just know it's all part of the balance. It's a mistake to change it.
Almost every great show has an equally great pilot episode, but SpongeBob's did it kinda differently, and that's exactly why it's perfect. See, most pilots for shows like Futurama, Gravity Falls, or even a story about a chemistry teacher that turns into a drug dealer, they all tick every box on the list of what a great pilot's supposed to be, as well as pushing the story off toward the adventure it's going to become. Meanwhile, SpongeBob's first episode is just an 8-minute story about a guy who wants a job as a fry cook, gets the job in the most ridiculous way, and goes home exactly who he was when he woke up. And somehow, none of that stops Help Wanted from being the perfect first episode for a very strange little show about underwater life. So, why does it work? Why is one of the most beloved pilots in cartoon history the one that didn't really follow the rulebook? If you grew up with this show, you know exactly how an episode is gonna open. A French narrator talking about the ocean like he's filming a nature documentary, panning over the conch streets, and then he points at a pineapple and tells you, kind of defensively, that yes, of course the sponge lives in a pineapple. What did you expect? Then we meet our sponge, just waking up from his sleep, then working out with a barbell that's held up by 2 stuffed animals, and basically getting ready for his big day, to apply for a job at the Krusty Krab. And so, right before the 2 minutes mark, we get to the first problem in this story. SpongeBob doesn't feel like he's up to the task, despite screaming, "I'm ready," all morning.
I'm ready, I'm ready, I'm ready.
I can't do this, he says, and his best friend Patrick gives him his weird pep talk, and that's enough to push SpongeBob to enter the Krusty Krab. And hold on to that, by the way, because we'll be coming back to it. Inside, he meets the two people who will spend the next 25 years dealing with him. Oh joy. Squidward, who realizes instantly that this yellow guy will bring so much inconvenience in the future, and Mr. Krabs, who at the time fully believes his one and only employee, so he sends him on a fool's errand to go and get a hydrodynamic spatula with port and starboard attachments and a turbo drive. However, the second he leaves, the wave of anchovies come. 5 buses of them. The Krusty Krab immediately gets swallowed by a sea of customers, escalating the situation in less than a minute. But just like the hero he is, SpongeBob comes flying back in with the spatula that, as it turns out, was real, only one in stock. Not to mention, he single-handedly feeds the entire mob without any guides or recipes from Krabs or Squidward, and pretty much saves the day. Of course, Krabs hires him on the spot, and the episode ends with Patrick wandering in to order a single Krabby Patty. 8 minutes and 18 seconds. That's the whole thing, which is a little strange when you actually stop and look at what happens in it. Because the more you study how a first episode is supposed to work, the less sense it makes why this one is so good. Now, if you asked how a perfect pilot episode is supposed to look like, the answer will always differ depending on what kind of show it is. Each has their own unique characters, settings, tone, and crisis at hand. But in general, and for the sake of arguments of this video, there are at least 5 things you wanted your pilot episode to do. 1. Introduce the characters and the world they live in. 2. Set up the relationships between each character. Who likes who can't stand who, and maybe who is being indifferent towards who. 3. Show you the tone of the show. Maybe it's funny, scary, sad, weird? Tell me now, so I know what I'm watching. 4. Set the stakes and hook the viewers. Give me a good reason to come back. And 5 is to serve as a preview of the philosophy of the show. Not the plot, the thing it's actually about underneath. So as it stands, Help Wanted clears the first 4 without trying. The world is really distinct from any other shows right from the get-go. We're underwater with a French narrator showing us Bikini Bottom like a wildlife special. There's 3 weirdly shaped houses in a row and a whole town humming in the background. For the relationships, you could tell everyone in this episode has a different mindset just from their first line. Squidward sees SpongeBob coming and visibly dies inside. Krabs sees a wallet he'd rather not open. Patrick, being the slow, weird, but positive best friend, and tells SpongeBob that he's about to see one of the best days of his life. And it's crazy to think that this is practically the engine of the entire series, established before anyone's touched a Krabby Patty. The tone itself is pretty much self-explanatory. It's a comedy show, a huge cartoonish, weirdly nautical, musical even, and completely committed to how silly it is. You know what you signed up for. As for the hook, you're watching a video essay about this episode 25 years later since this episode aired, so it's safe to say it hooked someone. Which leaves us to the number 5, the philosophy, the big one. And this is where Help Wanted does something that, on paper, should have broken it. So when we talked about a show's philosophy, it usually lives inside the main character, and most of the time, it shows up as a lack. You know, something about the hero that they're missing inside of them. Maybe it's respect or freedom, a purpose, a life that doesn't really mean anything. And the first episode is the moment that starts to change. You will watch the pilot and understand what the journey is about, that this person is going to become someone later in the series. SpongeBob doesn't have that at all. He wakes up in the first 30 seconds already the happiest he will ever be. He's not running from anything. There's no wound from the past, no emptiness, or even quiet sadness the show is going to slowly heal. He just wants his dream job, and then he gets the job on the very same day. And he ends the episode exactly as whole as he started, just with a sailor hat on. If you just take those descriptions without ever watching any of the show, that sounds like a flat character, or a pilot episode with no arc.
Who made a spatula out of toothpicks and woodchuck?
I did.
And remember that weird pep talk? Patrick doesn't tell SpongeBob he can do it, as in, he could change to be a better version of himself. He reminds him of who he already is. First words, "May I take your order?" Made a spatula out of toothpicks in a wood shop. This guy was a fry cook already before he ever walked through the door. There's no becoming here. He was born complete. So if the philosophy isn't inside him, where is it? It's everywhere around him. Help Wanted actually gives us a good look at a collision that will never stop happening. You take one creature of pure, unkillable sincerity, and you drop him into a world that is fundamentally bizarre. Squidward, who finds his joy offensive. Krabs, who sees his eagerness as something to exploit. A mob of anchovies that just want to be fed. And SpongeBob meets all of it with the exact same answer, with a total, genuine, slightly unhinged enthusiasm. And somehow, that's enough. The fool's errand turned out to be the kind that saves the day. So, for 25 years, we get a story of a good heart running straight into a world that doesn't deserve it, and somehow coming out the other side intact. The pilot isn't setting up a character who will grow into something. Rather, it's setting up a fixed point.
Cheers for SpongeBob! Hip hip!
All right.
And so, when your hero doesn't have an arc to protect, you're not locked into anything. You don't have to drive toward a destination, which consequently also lines up with the theme of the whole show in the future. By focusing on the character's uniqueness rather than a continuous lore-heavy plot, you can make a story for just about anything in this show. An episode about someone forgetting how to tie shoelaces, graveyard shift, band geeks, and even a weird existential journey on SB-129. Almost no one ever stops and gets confused asking, what is this show even about? The story always jumps around doing whatever they wanted that day. Because we all know unconsciously, this is not about a big journey to save the world, or even about someone finding his true ideology. It's just a compilation story about a bunch of weird friends who do every bit of weird stuff whenever they decide they want to. Like a Sunday afternoon as a kid, where the plot was just whatever you and your friends decided to play next. So, no. Help Wanted doesn't have an arc. It was never supposed to. Asking SpongeBob to change in his own pilot would be like asking the ocean to. He's not the one who's going to move. He's the thing everyone else moves around, and that is the philosophy, stated perfectly in 8 minutes on the very first day. Most shows spend their pilot promising you someone's going to change. Meanwhile, SpongeBob spent its pilot promising you someone never would, and then kept that promise for 25 years. And that's the thing about this show. The good stuff is almost never where you'd expect it. Sometimes it's the arc that isn't there. Sometimes it's a single line nobody thought about twice.
It's one thing to lose a fight. It's another to lay in the street and ask to be run over. Or to say you're done, that there's no point in going on. This is One Course Meal, the SpongeBob episode where Plankton says there's no point of continuing life, that he's done with everything. And somehow, this was played for laughs. But when you rewatch it now, it doesn't feel like a joke. Because this isn't a simple Krabs versus Plankton episode. It's not just another bad day in Bikini Bottom, it's something much darker. Starting with the moment Plankton tries to blow up the Krusty Krab, and somehow ends up afraid of mall money. Plankton shows up with another wild scheme to steal the Krabby Patty formula, this time using bombs, a glider, and full villain theatrics. Mr. Krabs and SpongeBob respond the only way they know how, by turning SpongeBob into a pea-shooting cannon. It's over-the-top cartoon chaos. Totally ridiculous. It's what we expect. Plankton actually wins the fights and manages to capture both of them. But then the show takes a dark turn. He is scared like he's seen a ghost. Turns out, Plankton has a deep-rooted phobia of whales. Not just because whales eat plankton in the food chain, but because, as we see in a cutaway flashback, his entire family was literally devoured by one. And Mr. Krabs? He sees this weakness and immediately decides to exploit it. And just like that, Plankton crumbles. He doesn't run because he's losing, he runs because he's terrified. At first, it feels like a throwaway gag. But this isn't a joke the episode drops. It's the joke the episode commits to. Krabs dresses up like his own daughter, stalks Plankton, and spends the rest of the episode terrorizing him with a fake whale persona. And I mean literally stalking. He starts to infiltrate Chum Bucket just to scare Plankton. From here on, we watch Plankton slowly unravel. He barricades his doors, refuses to step into the light, becomes a paranoid, sleep-deprived wreck. The guy gets so mentally broken down, he starts having nightmares where he's swallowed whole, burns in gastric acid, and ends up reunited with his dead ancestors inside a whale's stomach. And you know what's even more dark? Karen isn't buying this whole charade in the slightest. She kept ignoring Plankton's fear and brushed it off as delusional paranoia. Plankton's trauma isn't just mocked by the audience, it's ignored by his partner, and it only gets worse from here. Because after 16 days of mental torture, nightmares, and gaslighting, Plankton gives up. He lies down in the street and waits for a bus. He wanted to end it all. This is the moment everything stops being funny. This is a character with nothing left, who wants the pain to end. He lays in the road hoping to get hit by a bus. He even tells SpongeBob to step on him, and when SpongeBob won't, Plankton shrugs and says he'll wait for the next bus. And how does Mr. Krabs react to all this? He laughs. He actually erases Plankton's face off of a photo like he just won a video game. Even SpongeBob is like, sir, isn't this maybe going a little far? But Krabs brushes it off like it's no big deal. Eventually, SpongeBob, bless his naive heart, breaks the cycle. He tells Plankton it was Krabs in a costume the whole time. He even shares Krabs' biggest fear in return. So now, Plankton fights back. He confronts Krabs, brings in a mime, Krabs' greatest fear, and for a moment, it's cathartic. It's a nice little revenge arc, but it's short-lived, because SpongeBob interrupts again, this time with a fake whale attack. Not just a resolution, but with a character who we've seen tortured, gaslit, and broken down, disappearing under a joke. It's easy to dismiss it all as just cartoon logic, but come on, you felt it too, right? That wasn't just mean, it was off. It stuck with you for the wrong reasons, not because it was edgy, but because it felt hollow. So now we've got to ask, what went wrong here? How did a goofy rivalry turn into one of the most unsettling episodes in SpongeBob history? And more importantly, did it have to? You see, on paper, One Course Meal is just another Krabs vs. Plankton episode, but something about this one feels uncomfortable, and mean in a way that doesn't bounce back. But why? Let's start with Krabs. We all know he's greedy and selfish. He's a cheapskate and kind of a jerk, that's his whole deal. But in this episode, it goes beyond rivalry. He doesn't even really defend the formula. He crosses a line and stays there. Once he finds out about Plankton's fear of whales, Krabs doesn't hesitate. He immediately turns that into ammunition. He dresses up like Pearl, stalks Plankton, and gaslights him day after day, night after night. It stops being cartoon hijinks. We've never seen Krabs this sadistic, at least before Season 7, when this episode aired. What makes it feel even colder is how the episode commits to this. There's no moral pushback. Krabs never realized that he went too far with the tricks. Even after the mime's terror at the end, he knows exactly what it feels like and still doesn't stop. And Karen? Let's talk about Karen. She's his wife, his one lifeline. But in this episode, she's not just checked out, she's completely indifferent. You could say that at this point Karen is fed up with Plankton's shenanigans, because in fact, he has indeed failed a lot and made a lot of drama before. I mean, Karen doesn't even seem surprised when Plankton is failing in the episode. But even then, wouldn't 16 days of isolation, complete mental shutdown, and terror over a hallucinated threat warrant some concern? Instead, Karen becomes another symbol of this episode's emotional vacuum. She could have been the one to ground it, to add a human moment, but the writers didn't go there. SpongeBob might just be the only hero in this story. Watching it back again, maybe he knows that Plankton's fear wouldn't end well if it went untreated. SpongeBob purposely opens up Krabs' card, revealing the truth. Even goes as far as telling Plankton Krabs' biggest fears just so Plankton could get out of his own bad thoughts. He might have just saved Plankton from Squidward's level of depression. That's what makes this episode so uncomfortable. Not just that it's dark, but that it feels true in the worst way. Because the second Plankton stops being a threat, nobody checks in. Not his rival, not his wife, not even the show itself. It's cruelty without consequence. It's one thing to write a villainous character, it's another thing to celebrate their worst behavior without ever asking if they went too far. But you know what's also weird? In trying to be dark and edgy, this episode stumbles into something kind of true and tragic. Because this is exactly how a lot of people experience mental health in real life. You get mocked instead of helped, your breakdown becomes a punchline. And when you finally snap, no one asks why. They just talk about how crazy you looked. This episode unintentionally reveals sometimes people are more interested in watching someone suffer than asking how they got there. And Plankton, the guy we usually laugh at, ends up being one of the most human characters in the episode. Now, take a step back. Forget for a moment that it's SpongeBob. Just ask yourself, what are we really watching? Because what Plankton goes through isn't just some wacky misadventure. A lot of people know what Plankton feels like. Maybe it started small. A nickname, a habit, a fear, something people teased you about because it made you different. And at first, you laughed along. But over time, it stopped being funny because they didn't stop. And suddenly, you're not laughing. You're just surviving the laughs. We've all seen it. In school, at work, online, someone gets picked on because they're the weird one, the angry one, the outsider. And sure, sometimes that person lashes out, gets mean, loses it. But most of the time, that anger comes from somewhere. A fear, a loss, a sadness no one ever asked about. And when people find that crack, they press on it, poke at it like it's a game. It's just a joke. Why are you so sensitive? But jokes don't heal trauma. They just hide it, until one day you can't laugh at it anymore. What makes this episode unintentionally powerful is that it mirrors that pain. The kind we're not always brave enough to talk about, especially when it comes dressed as comedy. It shows how easy it is to ignore someone until it's too late. How easy it is to say, it's just a joke, instead of, do you need help? But maybe that's what we're supposed to take from this. Not the whale costume, not the mime revenge, but the quiet, terrifying truth. That sometimes the people who seem the most ridiculous are the ones hurting the most. And if we don't start looking closer, really paying attention, then we're not just missing the point, we're becoming part of the problem. So, what does it say about this episode that one of the darkest moments in SpongeBob history is played for laughs? Honestly, it says more than it meant to. Because one-course meal isn't just dark, it's careless. It treats trauma like a prank, depression is like a joke, and pain like it's part of the fun. But here's the thing. Plankton didn't deserve any of this. And neither do the people in real life who break down in ways no one understands. This episode isn't infamous just because it's mean. It's infamous because it reflects a truth we've all seen. That sometimes the world only takes you seriously after you've collapsed. That being bullied doesn't always look like shoves and insults. Sometimes it's subtle, passive, even dressed up in humor. But you know what stings more than crabs in a costume? Karen's silence. She's Plankton's wife, his partner, the only person who sees him behind closed doors, and yet, she does nothing. She just shrugs him off, calls him paranoid, and tells him to take out the trash. That ignorance, from the one person who's supposed to know him best, might be the coldest thing in the whole episode. If this story really wanted to go dark and say something meaningful, Karen should have been the one to step in, to check on him, challenge Krabs, or just ask if he's okay. Because being seen makes your pain bearable. And when even the person who should see you refuses to look, it breaks something deeper. Imagine if Karen had just one real moment. Something simple like, Plankton, I thought you were being dramatic, but I didn't know it got this bad. That would have changed many things. Because the show's message wouldn't be, toughen up. It'd be, we need to pay attention to the people we love, especially when they stop being themselves. And for a kid's show, that would have been a hell of a message. The world's full of people like Plankton. If you've ever felt like Plankton, you're not alone. You're not weak for hurting. You're not dramatic for reacting. You're human. And sometimes the strongest thing you can do is keep showing up. This episode might have missed the point, but you don't have to. We just have to look a little closer, and maybe start taking each other more seriously than a cartoon ever did. So yeah, One Course Meal might be one of the most dark SpongeBob episodes out there. Not because it's mean, but because it touches something sensitive and then laughs at it. Mr. Krabs has done a lot of questionable things over the years. Stealing, scamming, covering up crimes, you name it. But he wasn't always Bikini Bottom's most shameless crook. In the early days of SpongeBob, Mr. Krabs was just cheap. A petty businessman who cut corners, sure, but he didn't cross the law. Over time, the tough but caring boss started disappearing, and he was replaced by someone willing to lie, cheat, and even put others in danger for a quick payday. If you trace it back, there's a very specific moment where it all started. One episode where he crosses a moral line for the first time, and sets him on the path to becoming Bikini Bottom's most consistent criminal offender. When Mr. Krabs first appears in the Help Wanted episode, you can tell right away what kind of character he's gonna be. The voice, the posture, the way he calls SpongeBob lad, it's the same energy you get from an old-timey shopkeeper who will sell you gum for $1 and act like it's a bargain. From day one, Krabs' character is defined by two things. 1, he likes money. 2, he's cautious about anything that could threaten his business. If you're working for him, he'll push you to the limit. And if you're buying from him, he's already calculated how to get a little extra out of you. You can almost respect the hustle. Almost. Early on in the show, this trait is still pretty harmless. Like in Squeaky Boots, for example, we see how his logic works. He buys the wrong gift for Pearl, which is a pair of awful squeaky boots. So what does he do? He smooth talks SpongeBob into buying them off of him by trading his paycheck for something worth $2.
Got yourself a deal.
Fortunately, Krabs isn't just the kind of boss who hides in the office counting money. You actually see him out on the floor, shouting orders, flipping patties, even stepping up to help customers when needed. Though usually because it's hurting his wallet, not out of kindness. Still, there is a softer side to him in these early seasons. Krabs' relationship with his daughter Pearl is one of the earliest hints that he's not a one-note character. Sure, he's stingy with her, every gift comes with a price tag attached, but he does try to make her happy. In episodes like Culture Shock, he stages an entire talent show at the Krusty Krab, which is clearly a marketing tool for his business. But he also lets Pearl perform, giving her a moment to show off her cheerleading skills.
Hooray!
This is early Krabs in a nutshell. Always chasing profit, but still giving you warmth. By the time season 2 rolls in, Krabs' personality starts showing some real depth. In Bossy Boots, he lets Pearl completely redecorate the Krusty Krab into a teenage hangout, even though it's driving away customers, simply because he wants her to have a summer job. That's money out of his pocket, and he lets it happen anyway. In Welcome to the Chum Bucket, we see this kind of affection again. Krabs literally gambles SpongeBob away to Plankton in a card game, and then fights to win him back when he realizes how much his fry cook means to him. Other episodes like Hookie and Dying for Pie push this trait even further, putting Krabs in a dad role for SpongeBob and even Squidward, warning them about danger, telling them to care for each other, sometimes being more protective than their actual families. These early seasons also frame Krabs as a sort of community figure. Whether it's hosting talent shows, tolerating SpongeBob's squirrel jokes for the sake of the crowd, or even holding a Halloween party, the Krusty Krab is where people gather, and Krabs is right at the center of it. He's still a businessman at heart, but what matters is he was also part of the neighborhood fabric, which is why the smoking peanut hits so differently. This is the moment where the heart takes a back seat and something colder takes over. Before the main plot even kicks in, Krabs is already raiding the zoo like it's a clearance sale. Balloons, soda, even the light bulbs from the path lamps. If it isn't bolted down, it's going in his pants for sure. Why? Because it's free day, of course. Now, stealing light bulbs from a zoo is small potatoes for a cartoon character, and it could have been just another goofy Krabs gag. But when the story shifts to Clamu the giant oyster, things take a darker turn. Clamu the giant oyster is found crying hysterically, and the whole town panics. And here's the thing, this isn't just any sea creature. Clamu is framed as a beloved, almost sacred figure in Bikini Bottom. Hurting her is like kicking a puppy in front of the entire town square. The whole town is dying to know what kind of jerk is cruel enough to hurt one of Bikini Bottom's most beloved creatures. Too bad, SpongeBob is instantly under suspicion, because he's in the wrong place, wrong time, and to be fair, he did throw a peanut at Clamu. What follows the episode is a spiral of guilt. SpongeBob questions himself, asking left and right for validation, and finally works up the courage to confess in front of the entire town. The poor sponge admits it. Yes, he threw the peanut. He was the reason Clamu cries, or so he thinks. But here's the gut punch. The peanut wasn't the reason Clamu was upset. Krabs was. Turns out Krabs took Clamu's pearl, which, plot twist, turns out to be an egg, because money, right? Now this twist makes Krabs feel so heartless because while SpongeBob is drowning in guilt and Patrick is literally chained and humiliated in public, Krabs says nothing. He only comes clean when he's dragged into the open and the evidence is pulled from his clothes. Or with his clothes, I should say. It's worth pausing here because the smoking peanut feels different from every Krabs scheme before it. Up until now, Krabs schemes have been goofy, extra profit kind of stuff. You roll your eyes, you laugh, and it's over. But the smoking peanut? He commits a calculated theft and lying by omission. This is the first real crack in Krabs' image as the community's tough but reliable businessman. And as we'll see in the future, once he crosses it here, the slope only gets steeper. The thin layer of respectable businessman is gone. That episode proved he's willing to let friends take the fall for his crime. And it's like something in him clicked. The crimes only get bolder after that. Take Jellyfish Hunter, for example. On the surface, it looks like a story about discovering great food. SpongeBob shares his personal jellyfish jelly on a Krabby Patty, and the customers love it.
I just had a sandwich, no ordinary sandwich, a sandwich filled with jellyfish jelly.
One guy is so moved, he literally sings an impromptu ballad in the middle of the restaurant. Krabs tries it, and you can practically see the dollar signs light up in his eyes. So he makes SpongeBob a proposition. Catch more jellyfish. Lots more. Oh, and by the way, I'm not paying overtime. At first, it's small scale. A jar here, a jar there, but in true Krabs fashion, a few turns into all of them. More jellyfish means more jelly spread, means more profits. By the midpoint of the episode, SpongeBob's essentially been tricked into running an industrial operation. Nets, machines, entire hives emptied out until Jellyfish Fields is stripped bare. And here's the kicker. The whole time SpongeBob thinks they're just keeping the jellyfish comfortable. But that's just corporate lies, my friend. Krabs is running a secret jellyfish gulag behind the scenes. Factory tubes milking them dry, tossing their lifeless bodies into the trash, all while riding an exercise bike.
What is this horrible place?
It's just a sport for him. This greedy crab causes environmental destruction, animal cruelty, and manipulating someone who trusted him completely. This is the kind of thing you'd see in a depressing PETA ad at 2 a.m. It's the clearest sign yet that Krabs has moved past cutting corners and into burning the whole damn field down if it means more money at the register. And no, he doesn't stop there. Nasty Patty shows just how far he'll go when a human life, or well, a fish life, is on the line. It starts with what should be a harmless misunderstanding. Krabs mistakes a visiting health inspector as just some scammer looking to get free food. Now, a normal person might, I don't know, call the police, check his ID, literally anything that doesn't involve food poisoning. But not Krabs. He whipped up a patty topped with toenail clippings, seahorse radish, toilet water, and every disgusting thing he can get his hands on. And when the inspector accidentally chokes and passes out, Krabs' immediate reaction is damage control. In seconds, the episode shifts into a corpse disposal job, pressuring SpongeBob to take responsibility, even dig the grave himself.
What's this wee stuff? You fed him the tainted patty. Looks like it's the stony lonesome for you.
Even when they get stopped by police mid-burial, Krabs plays it cool, hiding the body and hitching a ride back to the Krusty Krab, with the corpse in tow. And when the police finally corner them, he flat out throws SpongeBob under the bus.
Okay, I confess. SpongeBob killed him!
What?
There's no more pretending he's just a quirky boss who pinches pennies. The mask is off. This isn't the lovable cheapskate from Season 1 anymore. This is the Krabs who will risk lives, commit crimes, and betray friends without a second thought. And the worst part? The show keeps proving it. By the time Season 3 rolls around, there's no mistaking it anymore. Mr. Krabs is operating like a small-time criminal, and the only law he follows is whatever makes him richer. Remember Clam's episode? What's supposed to be a simple company fishing trip turns into a Moby Dick-level obsession. When a giant clam swallows the dollar, Krabs doesn't just want it back, he's willing to hold SpongeBob and Squidward hostage at sea until they help him hunt it down. He ignores their exhaustion, rations their food, and risks their lives, all over a single dollar. There's also a time where Krabs sells SpongeBob a drinks hat for pocket change, only to discover it's worth a fortune to collectors. What's it called? One Krabs trash? Yeah, that's the one. Instead of admitting the mistake or negotiating fairly, he just decided to dig up the grave of Smitty Werbenjagerman Jansen to steal it back. We're way past petty. And if you ever wanted proof that nothing is off limits, Krabbyland delivers. This is Krabs at his most shameless, building a cheap, dangerous theme park out of scrap to lure kids in with false advertising. He charges them for everything inside, risks their safety, and hides in his office counting the money while SpongeBob distracts the kids. When the kids realize they've been scammed, Krabs just flees, sprinting away from an angry mob of children. By the end of Season 3, there's no denying it, the Mr. Krabs we met in Season 1 is gone. In his place is someone who will exploit employees, customers, children, and entire ecosystems for a quick payday. And mind you, those crimes are only from Season 2 and 3 alone, the golden era of SpongeBob. In later seasons, there's no tension over if Krabs will do something shady. The only question is how far he'll go this time. I could mention it all. Penny Foolish, The Krusty Sponge, The Krabby Chronicle. It's a greatest hits album of scams and exploitation. The list just goes on. And don't even get me started with episodes like One Course Meal. But that's not the point of this video. This isn't about listing all of his crimes. My point is that none of these moments would exist without the smoking peanut. That was the first time he crossed a moral line in broad daylight, let innocent people take the fall, and walked away without a shred of guilt. The first time he proved to himself that if it makes money, it's fair game. Legality? Kinda optional. And once you've made that leap, there's no going back. This one episode actually ruined Patrick Star's character and everything the writers have tried to build him as. And it's not the episode you think. If someone asks you, what is Patrick's worst episode? You'd probably point to the obvious ones, like Stuck in the Ringer, Yours, Mine, and Mine, maybe Pet Sitter Pat. And sure, those are bad, genuinely painful to sit through. I'm not gonna defend any of them. But this video isn't about Patrick's worst episode. In fact, the episode I'm talking about, The Card from Season 6, is not even close to being the worst. And yet, it's the one that marked the change. The one that drew the line between the Patrick we loved and whatever came after. By the end of this video, I don't think you'll be able to watch any Patrick episode the same way again, just like me. So let's talk about what actually happens in the episode. The story is about SpongeBob wanting a rare Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy trading card, number 54, a super rare, platinum, holographic, animated talking card, of which there are only 5 in existence.
Platinum hologram animated talking card, number 54.
He spends all his money buying pack after pack, trying to find it, no luck. Patrick, who is at the same store buying a counting book, buys the very last pack on a whim. He doesn't even care about the cards, but of course, he gets the elusive number 54 on the first try. Now right here, this is already classic Patrick energy. The guy who doesn't even try gets the thing the guy who tried hardest couldn't get. Yeah, just like he did with Rocky that one time in The Great Snail Race. And for Patrick, that's right on brand for his character. That's the kind of lovable, cosmic unfairness that made Patrick charming. But then the episode just keeps going. SpongeBob tells Patrick it's a rare card and explains how valuable it is. He wanted Patrick to treat it with a lot of care, just like he would. But of course, Patrick spends the rest of the episode just being so painfully oblivious, constantly putting the card in danger of being damaged. Like walking it through a mud puddle or dropping it in the fire. He even goes to great lengths to damage the card himself by using the card as a toothpick. He pries open the lock to get inside his house, and at one point, he uses it as a spatula to flip Krabby Patties. Yeah, and so for most of the episode, SpongeBob is just running around in a panic, throwing himself in front of every new disaster, while Patrick just keeps going from one catastrophic situation to the next, completely unbothered. The card did get destroyed by the end of the episode, after taking constant damage for almost 11 minutes. And now, SpongeBob's crying in the corner because the card is gone, and there's no way for him to get one for himself because Patrick said he would give it to him after the day ends, right? And the only reason this doesn't end in a complete tragedy is because, surprise, the pack Patrick bought had all 5 number 54 cards in it. So Patrick hands the remaining ones over to SpongeBob. Well, 3 of them. So after watching it for the first time, you could say it's a happy ending on the surface. Sure, SpongeBob gets his cards, everything works out. Except nothing about watching this episode feels happy. In fact, it feels exhausting, mean-spirited even. It feels wrong in a way that's hard to immediately put your finger on. And then Patrick opens his mouth and puts his finger on it for you. That's what it feels like. And that's not even the worst part of the episode, because right there in the middle of all this chaos, there's a moment where SpongeBob finally catches up to Patrick and asks him why he does all these things. Why do you keep putting the card in danger when you know how much it means to me? And Patrick just says this.
SpongeBob, you can't always expect my usual brand of stupidity. I like to mix it up.
I need you to sit with that for a second, because on the first watch, most people hear that and just laugh. We're on season 6, and maybe Patrick is starting to be overly aware for a second. But when you actually stop and think about what he just said, that means he knows he's stupid. He knows SpongeBob expects it, and he's telling us out loud that he actively chooses to vary it up, as if it's something he performs on a daily basis and adjusts depending on the situation. Which means everything that happened in this episode wasn't Patrick being oblivious. It was a choice after all. And for better or worse, that changes everything. Not only this episode, but every episode before it, too. Now, forgive me for bringing this topic up every time we talk about post-movie Patrick, but early Patrick wasn't just dumb. It was one of his traits, not his entire character. And he was dumb in a very specific way that the writers understood completely. If you pay close attention to the first 3 seasons, for the most part, there are really only 2 ways they ever used his stupidity in a plot. The first one is what I would call the split-second brainless moment. It's when Patrick does something stupid and something goes wrong in an instant.
That's not disturbing. This is disturbing. Hi there, SpongeBob.
And then they just go off, continuing where they left off. The joke doesn't stay for the whole episode, and it's really not connected to anything malicious. It just happens. Well, most of the time. Whether it's asking, is mayonnaise an instrument? In Band Geeks, or making fun of squirrels in One Squirrel, the scene will move on in no time, because everyone knows it's just a guy whose brain occasionally goes offline for a few seconds. Meanwhile, the second one, it's more serious. There are some episodes where Patrick's flaw is the actual focus for the whole plot, where his stupidity or his selfishness or his jealousy drives the story forward, like Big Pink Loser or Rockabye Bivalve. And while he's being childish or maybe even a jerk in those episodes, Patrick comes around at the end. He learns something from it and won't do it again in the future. Maybe. I mean, Patrick himself is not known as a character who loves to make a big apology. More often than not, it's just a small moment of genuine feeling that kind of cuts through everything, but it's always there. In Valentine's Day, he nearly destroys the carnival out of jealousy over presents. But underneath that is a real love for SpongeBob that just got twisted by insecurity. In Dumped, he's cold about SpongeBob's heartbreak over Gary, but it turns out he wasn't even choosing Patrick in the first place. And in Rockabye Bivalve, he's a terrible parent and an even worse partner, but by the end, there's at least an acknowledgement that something went wrong. My point is, you could forgive Patrick for being terrible in an episode because you always understood why he was terrible. There was always a human emotion underneath it, even if Patrick himself couldn't fully articulate it. Now, you might argue that there are some episodes where Patrick has shown to plan something or intentionally be mean to SpongeBob in some way. We had a few episodes like those in the golden seasons as well, ones like I'm with Stupid or even Secret Box. The thing is, they're always teasing us with the uncertainty of the assumption, or simply because the plot gives Patrick the road to go there. Actually, let me put it this way. On the surface, Secret Box is a simple episode. Patrick has a box with a secret inside, and SpongeBob spends the whole episode trying to figure out what it is. Patrick refuses. SpongeBob eventually sneaks in at night and opens it, only to find an empty box with a piece of string, and he feels terrible about violating Patrick's trust. But then the episode shows you what's actually hiding behind the secret flap. an embarrassing photo of SpongeBob at the Christmas party. Now, that takes planning. That takes a level of deliberate deception that doesn't really fit the purely innocent dum-dum version of Patrick. But here's what's interesting about that. Patrick never uses the photo, at least in the episode. He never threatens SpongeBob with it, never shows it to anyone, he just has it. And the episode never really commits to the why part. We never find out why he has it, or why he teased SpongeBob in the first place. So you're left with this uncomfortable half answer. Maybe he's secretly a little devious. Maybe the picture is actually some kind of story behind it. The story never tells you which one. The story only suggests that Patrick only keeps that photo to himself for any personal uses, I guess, which means he just likes to be on the edge, teasing SpongeBob to be as close as possible to the secret without ever really revealing it, by leading him to a false conclusion. Then there's I'm with Stupid, a story about when Patrick's parents are coming to visit, and he's afraid his parents are gonna think he's a fool. So they agreed to have SpongeBob pretend to be dumb so Patrick looks smart by comparison. However, Patrick takes it way too far. He really blurred the line between making himself look smart and downright making a fool of someone.
I mean, I've heard of barrel-chested, but never box-chested.
Now, the episode explains this as Patrick just getting carried away and forgetting the plan. And maybe that's true, but there's a good chance that Patrick knew exactly what he was doing and just enjoyed it a little bit too much. I think the same could be said with Driven to Tears and Rule of Dumb. The silver lining here is that there's this story about the world giving Patrick access to some kind of power in the plot. This gives us an understanding that, yeah, Patrick is a kid at heart and mind, so when you give him power beyond his comprehension, a fatal mistake is guaranteed. But the card doesn't do any of that. This episode was just confirming he's being an ass on purpose, as if telling us he was never kind or even cared in the first place. Is it just because it feels good to make people suffer? Especially SpongeBob and Squidward? I mean, Patrick just looks you directly in the eye and says, yeah, I'm a jerk, alright, so what? And I never felt more betrayed than that. There's a concept I came across that I think perfectly describes what the card accidentally confirms about Patrick. Someone on the YouTube comments section called it the Peter Griffin effect. And if you've watched Family Guy, you know exactly what I'm talking about. There's a specific episode called Petarded, where Peter finds out he's technically mentally disabled. And from that point forward, he starts using it as an excuse. He realized he has a get-out-of-jail-free card. He can do whatever he wants, cause whatever damage he wants, and people will either feel too guilty to call him out, or assume there's no point because he doesn't know any better. The stupidity suddenly becomes a shield for these characters, and not in a good way. I believe at some point, we don't know exactly when, Patrick figured out the same thing. Everyone in Bikini Bottom already expects him to be an idiot. SpongeBob expects it, the whole city expects it. So anything Patrick does gets filtered through that assumption first. If something goes wrong because of Patrick, well, that's just Patrick being Patrick. No point in getting mad, no point in holding him accountable, he just doesn't know any better.
You can't always expect my usual brand of stupidity. I like to mix it up.
He does know better. He knows exactly how people see him. And he's telling us consciously, deliberately, the stupidity isn't something that happens to Patrick anymore. It's just something Patrick does. It means every time Patrick caused damage and walked away with zero consequences, was that really obliviousness? Or was it someone who learned very early that being the dumb one means never having to say you're sorry? And look, I want to be fair here and give Patrick the benefit of the doubt. There are two ways to read this. Either Patrick has been performing the whole time, the charm was always real, but the stupidity was always at least partially a choice, which is dark, or, and this is maybe slightly more generous, Patrick genuinely started out as the lovable idiot, but somewhere along the way, he had his petarded moment. He realized how people saw him, and instead of pushing back against it, he leaned in. Because it was easier. Because it got him what he wanted, because nobody expects anything from the dumb guy. Either way, the result is the same. This might not be the episode to showcase his worst extreme jerk character traits in 11 minutes. I think Stuck in the Ringer or Yours, Mine, and Mine is worse in that context. But this one kills whatever Patrick is trying to do in the first 3 seasons alone. The Patrick we meet in The Card feels like he's not the same Patrick we used to know. And that ruined everything for me. Now, when you go back and watch Valentine's Day or Dumped, you really wonder, was he always doing this? Was the friendship ever real? Or was it all just a very convincing performance from someone who figured out very early that being the dumb one is the safest position in any room? I don't have a clean answer for that, and honestly, I don't think the show does either, which might be the worst part of all. What I do know is that after The Card, the writers stopped asking the question entirely. They stopped leaving room for the uncertainty. Episode after episode, Patrick's dumbness is just a plot device rather than a character trait. The Card didn't just ruin Patrick going forward, it recontextualized everything that came before. And I genuinely wish I could unsee it. Throughout the years, SpongeBob has made a few TV movie episodes. 2 years ago, we got Creepaway Camp for the 25th anniversary special, which I personally think is a pretty good episode. SpongeBob's Big Birthday Blowout in Season 12 as their 20th anniversary, which a lot of people seem to think is the best one yet. And then there's Atlantis SquarePantis back in Season 4. While not a numbered anniversary title, this was the first major TV movie episode that Nickelodeon made to kick the concept out of the gate. But this one is a mixed bag, to say the very least. Every time I read a comment section or a forum talking about this episode, it's either people hated it and called it SpongeBob's worst anniversary episode, or people absolutely loved it and say this episode is overhated. But what is with this episode that could divide people into 2 majorly opposing sides like this? Well, to oversimplify the answer, it's because this episode feels like it never happened. So, Truth or Square is a 1-hour-long episode in Season 6 of the show. It was released in November 2009, marking SpongeBob's 10th anniversary since it first aired on television. However, as cool as the title card is, it didn't really help us to understand the episode any better. In fact, to this day, I'm still wondering why they called it Truth or Square. Speaking of the plot, it's basically divided into 2 different sections that unfortunately love to overlap each other every few minutes. The animation of SpongeBob itself and the IRL journey of Patchy the Pirate at Nickelodeon HQ. For the Patchy section, it's stacked to the brim with cultural references. Right from the get-go, we get a voiceover narration from Ricky Gervais.
10 years ago, an unknown pirate from Encino began a decade-long obsession with an absorbent sponge.
He's basically telling Patchy's journey in the show over the last 10 years, and today, as a longtime SpongeBob fan, he'll be visiting the Nickelodeon studio to ask SpongeBob himself to be a guest star on his own show. Then he goes to the security guy, tells him why he's there, and gets told to wait in the waiting room for the cast. In the meantime, we finally get to see our title card and the animation section. Gary wakes up in the morning by lots of alarm clocks lined up to the foghorn clock, only to blow out more clocks, thus waking up SpongeBob. After turning them all off, he greets Gary and says he has to use all these clocks, or he might otherwise miss the 117th anniversary of the Krusty Krab. Yes, 117th anniversary. It's a weird number for sure, but we'll talk more about it later. SpongeBob also says he remembers the first time he ever visited the restaurant, and despite the fact that he's still inside his mummy's tummy, he fell in love with the dish. After that, SpongeBob does his morning routine montage as usual, then rushes all the way to the Krusty Krab where he bumps into the customers waiting in line to get into the restaurant, so he jumps over the crowd's heads. Inside the Krusty Krab, Mr. Krabs activates all the metal shields just so they could have a secret briefing before the event. Krabs said they had to be extra careful today because Plankton is for sure gonna take all the chaos from the event and use it as an opportunity to try to steal the recipe again. That's also why he hired Patrick for extra muscle.
Who are you? And who are you working for?
Meanwhile, at the Chum Bucket, Plankton is in the middle of celebrating 50 years of failure. He said he already tried to steal the recipe 1,003 times exactly, and 1,003 times he gets launched back to the chum bucket in failure. There's even a whole montage of SpongeBob and Krabs launching Plankton via all kinds of equipment. Some of it actually references previous episodes, like skiing apart from Krabs a la mode. But of course, Karen always manages to sweet talk him back into trying, no matter how crushed he is. All she needs to do is just say some encouraging words.
Now who's my big man?
Now, Karen.
Come get out there and steal that recipe.
Yes, ma'am.
Meanwhile, in Nick's HQ, Patchy found a Rolodex in the room. For those of you who are not familiar, it's basically a big rolling card holder to store people's contacts or even business cards. So Patchy sees one of them, stacked with celebrity numbers. Then he gets Devil and Angel Potty, the parrot, popping into his head, basically tempting him to call the celebrity for the extravaganza event. Patchy, being the opportunist pirate that he is, of course, wouldn't miss it. So he started calling some big celebrity names: Rosario Dawson, Tina Fey, who he thought was Tina Turner, Will Ferrell, and even King James himself.
Hey, LeBron, how's the dribbling?
Hey, Patchy, what's up?
Guest on the Fan Club McGoracle special for SpongeBob.
I gotta go.
Patchy was just basically asking every single one of them to become a guest star for his SpongeBob show. These scenes would keep going for at least 6 minutes before we get back to Krusty Krab again, where the crew is on the final stage of preparations. SpongeBob has just finished decorating everything with pink toilet paper, sauce, and inflated patties. Mr. Krabs cranks up the menu price to a sports event level, and Patrick makes sure everything is safe again.
Security?
And for the final touch of the decorations, SpongeBob already prepared a giant statue of a Krabby Patty made purely out of ice. But since it was so big and located deep in the walk-in freezer, he needed everyone's help to push it out. Needless to say, things can only go wrong from here.
Guys, I'm okay. No need to scream.
So now they're stuck in the freezer, and Krabs said the only reasonable way to get out of there is through the air duct. From here on, we get to see their journey in the whole air duct system, which is basically the rest of the episode. Most of it was just slapstick jokes over and over again. There really isn't much plot progression. What's interesting, however, is how the nostalgia theme plays out in their journey, because Krabs found a patty wrapper, which he claimed to be from the good old days.
Patty wrapper.
Now, a word from our sponsor.
Krabbypatty.
I don't know about you, but I'm not sure Krabby Patty existed as early as the 1950s. But I could be wrong. Anyway, now every time they stumble upon something, or even when they're simply having a brainstorming session on how to get out of there, they always say something like, "Remember that one time where I blah blah blah," or something else. They would say something as simple as, "Remember the last time you let SpongeBob redesign the interior?" Which he completely turned the whole restaurant into various styles? To something as crazy as, "Remember that one time where I married Sandy?" Which turns out to be just a stage play about SpongeBob's wedding, for better or worse. Not long after that, they would stumble onto a secret surveillance room, where Krabs set up a bunch of secret cameras all over the city and stalked everyone doing everything 24/7. You might be familiar with the scene. It has fueled some of the craziest theories on the internet, including some of mine. Now, back in the real world, Patchy is still doing the same thing more or less. He's calling Craig Ferguson, you know, the Scottish late-night host. Patchy asked him, since they're longtime friends, but Ferguson said he's busy handling his own show. In fact, he's got a big guest coming up, Mr. Robin Williams. Rest in peace. So, out of spite, Patchy said, "Screw you, Ferguson, I'm gonna kidnap Mr. Williams for my own show."
And there's this pirate. Mr. Williams! Is everything all right in there? Yes, I think so. Go that way.
That way, go that way. Go that way.
Yeah, it's a whole skit of kidnapping for a kids show. it's actually kinda cringeworthy to watch it now. I mean, it's not bad or anything, it's just that all this happened in 2009, and now that I'm an adult, in my late 20s, it just feels cringier than I remember. Anyway, Patchy did start his own extravaganza show, but SpongeBob didn't show up at all. So, he just got mad and decided to take off with his boat and see SpongeBob in person. He actually manages to reach Bikini Atoll quickly before getting eaten alive by a whale. On the bottom of the sea, Plankton is finally making his move to infiltrate the Krusty Krab via the air duct system. It goes without saying that he will end up meeting with SpongeBob and the team to have another nostalgia session.
Before anyone sees us.
Mr. Krabs would actually break the 4th and 5th wall here in the flashback, managed to stop Plankton from hearing the recipe, and launch Plankton once again. Around this time, Squidward would also recall how good life was on Conch Street before SpongeBob moved in. It's all sunshine and rainbows every day, even at the workplace. We also learn that SpongeBob's pineapple home is a real pineapple dropped from a boat from the surface, and it lands beside Squidward's home. And SpongeBob, for whatever reason, pays the real estate agents a sack of money for the house. That's the whole story. But before we get to the final stage of their air duct journey, we get to see Patchy one more time. Now he's trapped inside the whale's mouth, crying about the failed extravaganza show. He said it's supposed to be the moment where he and SpongeBob watch all the compilation videos together. In one of the videos, there's Patchy saying, "Did you know SpongeBob was not the first character picked to be the main character? He was picked because he's the most fitting for the opening song."
Who lives in a monument under the sea?
He's basically playing variations of the opening, but with Squidward, Patrick, and Mr. Krabs instead of SpongeBob. Which would be fun, actually. I would love to see Bikini Bottom played out from Squidward's point of view. Patchy also gives us another alternative opening. This one I actually think is the most adorable of them all.
I'm ready to go to work.
It's an early Walt Disney type of animation. From the early 1930s, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, the old school Mickey Mouse had its own charm. I would pay to watch a SpongeBob in that style. But before Patchy could even finish watching the tape, the projectors got burned, thus making the whale shoot Patchy back to the studio in California. Then he would be greeted by his guest star and pass out for good. Back to the air duct, the boys finally had enough. They have been trapped longer than they should and should break out using their heads now. Yes, using their heads to break out. Just like that, they made it out of there. They should have done it from the freezer in the beginning, honestly. Now, they are just too late. All the customers are already gone, tired of waiting. Mr. Krabs is crying because the big day is ruined, but it's okay. SpongeBob will save the day with some singing, just like all the specials.
Hey, back! SpongeBob's dopey little song is bringing him back!
The celebration is saved, everyone is alive and well, and they live happily ever after. Oh, by the way, they catch Plankton about to run with the recipe before the ending, but Krabs just catches him again. I actually kind of forgot Plankton was still in the plot. Another BTW is that we get one more Ricky Gervais narration for the outro of the episode. So yeah, that's basically it. No more BTWs, I promise. Anyway, the whole plot is kind of going back and forth, right? But you see, even after I try to help compress the whole story, it still feels like it's overshadowing itself. Because if you watched it yourself, then you would know each section only runs for about 5 minutes before going back to another one. The pace just felt like a pinball game, especially if you're watching it with ads on television. It's pretty easy to forget what we're watching halfway through, but I still have to give credit where it's due. For this video, I'm watching a full 59-minute extended version, which is longer than the original 51-minute runtime. They've added the Ricky Gervais intro and outro here, and a few more interactions with celebrities. However, if you're watching the streaming version nowadays, you're most likely to watch a shortened 41-minute episode, where they focus only on the animation plot and trim down some of the patchy sections, which, interestingly, became the source of this whole mixed bag response. As I said before, people's opinions are divided, and mainly for that reason only. Some people actually hated watching the patchy parts, which unfortunately covers about 60% of the episode. They just wanted to see SpongeBob and the gang celebrating the 10th anniversary, and even when they get to see the animation part, it's really shallow. This whole plot about SpongeBob getting ready, preparing for the event, getting stuck in the air duct, and making their way out could genuinely be compressed into a normal 11-minute episode, which is crazy to say the least. That's why some people pointed out that the whole plot dragged out without feeling earned. They just kept circling the whole time while throwing in some alternate memories of SpongeBob. Funny enough, this is also why I brought up the episode title before, Truth or Square. It doesn't really have anything to do with the plot. In fact, the alternate options for this episode title were Anniversary Special, The Great Escape, or my favorite one, Stuck in the Freezer. It perfectly sums up the episode, but at least they kept that alternate title for other regions. Like for the Spanish and Portuguese dubs, the title is still Stuck in the Freezer. Even in French, the title is just changed to SpongeBob SquarePants, Totally Frosty Secrets. But that's just French things. As for the ones that loved this episode, they genuinely love or enjoy the patchy part. And I could confidently say most of them are the ones living in the US. Or at least are knowledgeable about the US cultural references, to some extent. There's just so many celebrities you wouldn't be familiar with if your kid's living in other parts of the world. There's Will Ferrell and Tina Fey, who are famous comedy actors and actresses here, from things like Saturday Night Live and big comedy movies. Craig Ferguson is also a famous late-night host, but even I didn't watch the late-night show that much. Even Triumph, the insult comic dog, is a hard-to-understand reference. He was relevant around 2009 because of the 2008 election, but like, what kid is going to get that? I think Kobe Bryant is the only familiar face with kids around the globe, with the NBA and all. So yeah, I could genuinely understand anyone outside the US not liking the patchy part. They're not bringing universal references or jokes like the caveman one.
When worlds collide.
Pretty sweet, eh?
On the other hand, some of you that like this episode like to point out that this episode is overhated, and even if it's not that good, it's still better compared to other specials like Atlantis SquarePantas, which is considered to be one of the worst specials, apparently. I kind of disagree with that, actually. I love Atlantis SquarePantas. I'll take that over Truth or Square, but you know what? You do you. However, the biggest thing that makes many people, including myself, not really enjoy this episode is, again, because this episode feels like it never happened. It's a running theme here to bring out the whole, hey, remember that one time where blah, 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 blah. However, what they did bring out every time they had a flashback is something new to us. Instead of just making a quick flashback of whatever happened in the last 10 years of the show, they decided to add some lore explanation here and there. Like how SpongeBob gets his first house and lives on Conch Street. Or how Mr. Krabs brings SpongeBob to walk in circles around the world to make sure they're not being followed before revealing the secret recipe. But then, some of them are outright too ridiculous to be taken seriously.
I'm a doctor, as far as you know.
To join these two hearts in the bonds of love.
And when you put all of them together with a bunch of alternate versions of SpongeBob, like the other cast's opening songs and the old school Disney reference, you get a sense that this episode might just be a montage collection of SpongeBob what-ifs. Does that make sense? Yeah, like from a creative standpoint, there are lots of fun, wild, and interesting ideas to be made, but way too risky to be put on a regular show. How'd SpongeBob get to Conch Street in the first place? Let's explain it quickly. What do you think SpongeBob will look like if it was made by old school Walt Disney? Let's make that. You said SpongeBob and Sandy are a perfect couple? Let's make a joke about that. They're just answering some of the biggest fan questions about SpongeBob, but without much lore. There are barely any nostalgic feelings here. I used to really overthink about why is this episode titled Truth or Square in the first place. So I did some searching and found that apparently it's a twist on Truth or Dare. So is it like the jokes here are about Either we speak the truth about SpongeBob, or we just make it SpongeBob, who loves being all over the place with its lore and doesn't really have that continuity. Is that it? I don't know, man. At the end of the day, this episode is just like an unrelated spin-off to me. Something like Camp Coral. Though I feel bad making that comparison because Truth or Square is not a bad episode at all. It just feels like it never really happened. Looking back, it's still a weird chapter in SpongeBob's history. Truth or Square gives us so many weird references and alternate SpongeBob lore, I couldn't help but to think, is it even real? If anything, all the crazy stuff in this episode became a good source for some of the craziest conspiracy theories. I know I love to quote this episode. This episode might also be the mark of the modern changes for SpongeBob. The Dark Ages just started in Season 7, right after this one. We all know how it is in modern seasons. However, that doesn't mean recent seasons don't have anything good in them.
What makes this episode so horrifying is how real it is when I watch it again as an adult. Watching it as a kid, I probably just laughed at Squidward's stupidity, how he works himself up over nothing. But now it feels like I've been there before. That inescapable dark spiral of paranoia that comes when I overthink things. It's truly terrifying. It starts with Squidward in one of his normal moods, sad and broody. Nothing new, but it sets the stage for the lunacy soon to come. He watches the tranquil spring day and frolicking jellyfish from inside the Krusty Krab, or what he calls a prison of high cholesterol.
And here I am, trapped in a prison of high cholesterol.
Which is one of my favorite Squidward lines of all time. To further agitate Squidward's already volatile mood, SpongeBob rings the service bell repeatedly, testing to see if it works. Weirdly, this unnecessary repetition of a task by SpongeBob is a foreshadowing of exactly what Squidward will do later, but in a larger, much more unhinged fashion. Squidward questioning loudly why he's there in the first place. It's Sunday after all, and there are never any customers on Sundays. Already starts working himself up. In a fit of rage, he smashes the cash register, triggering a chain reaction of the series of chaotic events to come. First, a barrage of coins hit the floor, and Mr. Krabs, doing his normal Krabsy stuff in his office, goes on high alert. Because, for him, the sound of money is like a fire alarm. Squidward, trying to return order to the mess he created, tries to pick up the coins, but a distraught Mr. Krabs slaps him out of the way, calling him a barbarian, and gathers the coins, which he calls his babies, rather ineffectively with his massive red claws. At this stage, Mr. Krabs freaks out so much that you're probably thinking this video should have been called the episode that completely broke Mr. Krabs. And I don't blame you. He screams about his clean money now being soiled, which I found hilarious. Because one of the first things my mom taught me was not to put money in your mouth because you don't know where it's been. But to Mr. Krabs, money is sacred. So he rushes to the sink to wash the floor and probably Squidward's grime from his babies. But one dime goes rogue and after a little dance around the rim, plunges into the drain, which causes Mr. Krabs in a moment of utter distress to push his massive claw into the much smaller hole of the sink. Long story short, in an attempt to free himself with some help from SpongeBob, he loses both arms and gets bonked on the head by an array of heavy objects. And off to the hospital it is with him and his detached arms. And that's where he makes one of the biggest mistakes of his life and leaves Squidward in charge.
Squidward, I'm putting you in charge of things around here while I'm gone.
Now, Squidward is actually an extremely responsible dude, so what he does next, he only does because he's convinced there will be no customers that day. He leaves SpongeBob in charge and runs off to run some managerial errands, which is code for he's going to relax his butt off for the rest of the day. I'm not saying it's right, but I probably would have done the same. As he walks home and thinks about the day that lies ahead for him, filled with relaxation and pampering, we start to see the first speck of guilt and uncertainty enter his mind, when, for a second, he feels bad for SpongeBob working alone and quickly shrugs it off. But that one little speck of guilt is all your brain needs to start a maelstrom of anxiety. Suddenly, mid-walk, Squidward imagines what SpongeBob might be up to and is struck by a horrifying vision. In his mind's eye, he sees SpongeBob handing Patrick change for a single quarter, not in coins, but in the form of towering heaps of cash. Realizing he never taught SpongeBob how to make change, he rushes back to the Krusty Krab and opens the cash register. Although all looks well, he decides to test SpongeBob's change-making prowess by asking for change for $1. SpongeBob surprises him by giving him a myriad of options, all perfect, and Squidward, mad at the world as always, stomps off home. But I like to think on the inside, he's just mad at himself for having this anxiety, which I can definitely relate with. Finally, he finds some peace and takes some time to sunbathe, wearing that stupidly ridiculous umbrella hat of his, which I now wish I had as well. Anyway, instead of just enjoying himself and embracing the choice he made not to be at the Krusty Krab, his imagination takes him on another wild ride. And he envisions SpongeBob being so bored at work that he passes out behind the cash register. Not unrealistic if you ask me, except for the part where this causes the whole restaurant to catch fire. Completely unrealistic. But how many times have I had similar dark fantasies come to me when trying to relax or go to sleep? It's like your brain telling you left the stove on while you sit in the dentist's chair, unable to speak. I think this happens to a lot of us because of guilt over small things or just anxiety caused by the ups and downs of life in general. Squidward is at odds with himself. He sprints toward the Krusty Krab, convinced he needs to check on SpongeBob, but stops, realizing he's probably just being paranoid. Then, as if fate wants to torment him, a fire truck speeds past, sirens blaring, which in Squidward's mind is undeniable proof that something disastrous is happening back at the restaurant. Without another thought, he dashes back to the Krusty Krab, and although there's not a flame in sight, he empties a fire extinguisher all over the place, his nerves on edge. Are you starting to see the pattern here? Remember how earlier I mentioned SpongeBob repeatedly ringing the bell just to see if it works? That bell ringing becomes a metaphor for Squidward's spiraling paranoia. Each time he convinces himself things are fine, a new bell rings in his mind, reigniting his fears. Like SpongeBob with the bell, Squidward keeps testing his own anxieties, unable to let go of the thought that something might go wrong if he doesn't check and check again. And the spiraling paranoia of him is definitely driven by guilt. When SpongeBob asks him how his errands are going, he falsely thinks SpongeBob is insinuating that there aren't any errands, which, well, there aren't. But the truth of the matter only adds to his guilt, anxiety, paranoia, and anger for not being able to still his mind. Back home, he gives himself a stern talking to, which we all know never works. You just end up putting yourself more on edge. He even talks to himself in the mirror and says, "Repeat after me. You will not go back to the Krusty Krab." But instead, SpongeBob answers saying, "I will destroy the Krusty Krab."
You will not go back to the Krusty Krab.
I will destroy the Krusty Krab.
And this is where all hell breaks loose. Squidward runs to the Krusty Krab and back to his house, over and over, countless times, each time being met by SpongeBob asking him if he's finished those errands. The battle in Squidward's mind has now completely manifested in his actions, driving him to the brink of madness. He confronts SpongeBob, accusing him of being up to something sinister, even though SpongeBob has done nothing wrong, at least nothing outside Squidward's own spiraling imagination. Realizing once again that his paranoia has taken over, Squidward decides he needs to go to extreme lengths to stop himself from giving in to these frantic urges. He barricades himself inside his house, layering it with locks, chains, and even police tape. When we finally see his face, well, he's not doing so good. Squidward looks like he's aged 30 years, with one eye bulging wildly and his face sagging, especially around his long, wrinkled nose. Yet there's a manic grin stretched across his face, as if he's finally achieved peace by physically isolating himself from his paranoid thoughts. But of course, there's one major flaw in his plan. You can't lock out your own mind. Things start to get really weird when he goes to take a relaxing pink bubble bath, hoping to soothe his nerves. But soon, he hears SpongeBob's laughter echoing through the house. Paranoia flares up once more, and now he's convinced that SpongeBob has escalated to spying on him, trying to catch him slacking on his errands. But the only person escalating is Squidward himself. He mirrors his own feelings of guilt on SpongeBob, and ready to catch SpongeBob red-handed away from his post, he looks out the window and he realizes the sound he hears aren't SpongeBob's laughter at all, but just branches scratching against his house. Then he thinks he sees SpongeBob behind the bath's curtains, but it's just the toilet. And finally, something in Squidward's brain goes haywire, because he sees SpongeBob in the bath with him, once again asking him about those errands. SpongeBob disappears beneath the foam and Squidward follows, but we now see him in a more animal form. He's much more octopus-like, which probably means he's now completely on autopilot, thinking with his animal brain on, not rationally. He sees SpongeBob disappear down the drain and immediately acts on his paranoid instincts. Naked, except for some foam and his shower cap, he bursts through the barricaded door and heads straight for the Krusty Krab, which leads him to this unhinged scene. Completely broken, Squidward now realizes that the place he's most relaxed is actually behind the cash register. And SpongeBob is so kind as to give him his square pants to wear for the rest of the day. There's a nice little extra metaphor at the end of the episode, where SpongeBob realizes that the restaurant sign was set to closed instead of open, reminding us to be more mindful and not jump to conclusions. Things aren't always what we believe them to be. In this episode, we watched as Squidward's own mind became his greatest enemy. Each small choice, leaving SpongeBob in charge, imagining worst-case scenarios, and spiraling into paranoid fantasies, builds up, reflecting a cycle that's all too familiar in real life. How often do we, like Squidward, find ourselves trapped in a loop of overthinking, unable to quiet the anxious voices in our heads? This episode cleverly highlights the futility of trying to outrun our own thoughts. Squidward's attempt to barricade himself away from his anxieties is a relatable but ultimately doomed strategy. In reality, just as Squidward realizes we can't lock out our fears and insecurities, they're always with us, even when we try to hide from them. By the end, we see that his safe place might actually be in facing these anxieties head-on, symbolized by him returning to his familiar spot behind the cash register. The final reminder with the restaurant's sign, how it was mistakenly set to closed instead of open, underscores a powerful message. Sometimes we only need to change our perspective to break free from our own self-made prisons.
I've badmouthed a lot of the modern SpongeBob episodes, and for good reason. A lot of them suffer from flanderization, being obnoxiously loud, and relying too much on this slapstick aspect of the jokes, especially when it comes to torturing Squidward. With that being said, that doesn't mean that in all of my days watching modern SpongeBob, I haven't found a single good, or at least proper episode. In fact, there are some really good episodes that are worth talking about, but this one, it's great, to say the least. And you know what? I'm just gonna call it right now. This episode might just be better than the classics. You'll see why. So this episode is called Snow Yellow and the Seven Jellies. It's a 21-minute special for season 14, which aired just over a year ago at the end of 2024. And just in case it wasn't already obvious from the title, it tells a story of SpongeBob and the rest of the crew parodying the classic fairy tale Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, with their own style, of course. The episode opens up with Hans, the realistic sailor hands from the Suds, welcoming us to the new segment of the show.
Hello, I am Hans, and welcome to Fishy Fairy Tales.
Then he grabs a dusty book from the shelf with the exact same title, and we get to see their story from here on. Once upon a time, there was a happy little prince called Snow Yellow. He was the most cheerful person in the castle by far. Not only that, he also loved to feed the royal jewels to the peasants for breakfast and sing a song with the magical wishing well. What a lovely prince. Unfortunately, just like every protagonist in fairy tales, Snow Yellow isn't gifted with the most loving family member. He had a cruel stepmother named Queen Karen who clearly didn't love her stepson in the very least. Mainly because he was always happy for no reason. Luckily for the queen, the world gives her another reason to hate Snow Yellow because she just realized her stepson is square.
Here all of a sudden.
My big boy edges just grew in. Thanks for noticing.
And just in case you didn't understand why being square is a punishable sin, it's because how can there be two square beings in this kingdom? Therefore, since there are two square beings now, there has to be one that is the squarest in comparison, right? Well, what better way to get the answer than to ask the all-knowing magic mirror?
You, my queen, are square, 'tis true, but Snow Yellow is the squarest.
Needless to say, it was simply unacceptable for Queen Karen. This kingdom is too small for two square beings at once, so in order to become the squarest in the whole kingdom, she has to eliminate Snow Yellow. Actually, they didn't go that far with the stories. The queen just wants to de-squarify him, which is just as cruel, I think. But you know what? It's still gonna be tricky, because Snow Yellow could just regenerate, right? You could cut him up now, but he'll be back to square one, no pun intended, in just a few seconds. So I'm curious to see what she has in mind. So she immediately calls her trusty huntsman from the dungeon and tells him to take the prince to the forest and snip off his squareness while no one is looking. The fellow hunter resists at first, especially because he said he's just a truffle hunter and not a sponge slicer. But the queen wouldn't take no as an answer.
I'll cut off your corners!
So, with a heavy feeling, the hunter tries to catch up with the prince in the forest to execute his cowardly mission. At first, he tried to deceive the prince by saying he's hungry, so that the kind-hearted Snow Yellow would turn his back, giving him the opportunity he needed. However, when he saw Snow Yellow make a royal Krabby Patty on a golden platter for him, with pickles I suppose, the hunter just couldn't bring himself to harm the prince. Not only did he fail in his task, but the hunter would go so far as telling the prince the queen's plan to de-squarify him. So the hunter told him to run far away, far enough to hide from the heartless Queen Karen. But just when Snow Yellow thought he was running away from the queen, little did he know a bizarre journey that was about to change his life was waiting for him right in the corner. Because it didn't take long for the prince to do something stupid, such as falling off the cliff within seconds. Now the prince was trapped in the deep, dark woods, which hosts a lot of evil creatures within it. Then, while he was trying to run from the evil creature, he came across a cute little hive in the forest, a place that was just perfect for him to hide for the time being. So he shrunk himself to get inside the hive, but what he found was a sticky situation, to say the least. The place was cute and well furnished, but it was so dirty because of all of the jelly. And since Snow Yellow saw 7 mini chairs with a name engraved on each, he thought, maybe if I clean this place, whoever lives here will let me stay for a while. So he did just that. In the meantime, the 7 jellyfish who lived there were all working in the mines. They're all just honest, hard-working jellyfish who mine the flowers of the sea every single day from 8 to 5, well, except one jellyfish. They lived peacefully far away from the castle, so you can imagine how surprised they were when they got back home and found a snoring monster in their kitchen. So they jumped Snow Yellow without hesitation, but luckily, the prince was immune to such blows because he's a sponge. All of them managed to calm down and have a good friendly conversation. Snow Yellow also explained how he ended up there in the first place. Meanwhile, at the castle, the hunter was feeding lies to the queen about how he successfully de-squarified the prince with no trouble, and the queen was gullible enough to eat the lies, but not with the all-knowing mirror. Needless to say, only cruel fate awaited the huntsman because the queen decided to feed him to her pet alligator. So the queen said, "Fine, I'll do the cutting myself." She went to put on her witch costume, then brewed up some poisonous chum and coated it in candy so that no one could resist. Without wasting much time, the queen found the prince easily and knocked on the hive while all the jellyfish were working in the field. Through her equally sweet words, she managed to convince him to eat the poisonous chum.
You'll be in a dehydrated sleep forever.
Dummy, his name, by the way, was just a few seconds late from preventing the evil deed on his own. He was just about to pick up his forgotten pickaxe at home. Luckily, he still managed to slip from the queen's robotic hands and send the SOS flare to all the jellyfish. But they were all way too late. Dummy said Snow Yellow was already dehydrated and the queen was already gone after eating every single one of their jelly patties. Sure. However, even I didn't expect all of them to hold such grudges and decide to hunt down the queen for payback. I guess that's blue-collar workers for you. The queen still had some technology up her sleeve, but that was still not enough to shake off all the jellyfish. They all followed her back to the castle, breaking through every wall of defense the queen possessed, before finally cornering her at the top of the castle, where they took their sweet revenge.
Screwdrivers! I was the squarest.
I guess that's the equivalent to a slow death, right? Death by 1,000 cuts, death by 1,000 bolts unscrewed. Same thing. And now that the evil queen was gone, the jellyfish put the dehydrated Snow Yellow next to a dish sponge to keep him from getting moldy. They were all weeping because they lost a dear friend, even though their meeting was only for a brief time. But miraculously, their jet stream of friendship tears was enough to rehydrate Snow Yellow back to life again.
Snow Yellow? You're still alive!
And naked.
All of them hugged each other, sang one last song together, and they all lived happily ever after. What a lovely story. Now, if you haven't watched the episode yourself, I definitely encourage you to. You won't regret it. Now, you could probably guess why I think this episode might surpass the classics, right? No? Well, let me spit it out for you then. Again, as I mentioned earlier in the video, we got a lot of bad modern episodes with little to no story depth in them. Sometimes you just get obnoxiously loud ones, sometimes painful ones, and a lot of meh here and there. So, with that in mind, I always watch every new episode of SpongeBob with a cynical thought in mind, almost pessimistic even. It just comes as a habit to always look out for what's bad in the episode, or how can I nitpick this episode? Which is admittedly kinda sad because that was kind of unavoidable when you make a video about SpongeBob every other week. Or maybe it's just a me thing, I don't know. However, when I watched Snow Yellow and the 7 Jellies, I couldn't find anything bad in it, or at least not bad enough to point out to you guys for a video. Instead, I'm thinking I actually kinda liked it. Even more than a fish called Sandy from season 15, which a lot of people pointed out as a good benchmark for the newer seasons, right? They brought back the old animation styles, the color grading, the character-driven plot, etc. And while that is good, I think this episode does something even better in another aspect. Crafting a plot that combines the old DNA with a new plot they never explored before. Of course, it's not really a new plot in itself. Snow White is a classic fairy tale that is more than 200 years old. But I'm still really surprised at how well they integrated the concept with SpongeBob's own lore. The fact that they have to be the squarest of them all instead of the fairest. And they actually fit the character roles of Snow White and the evil queen accurately. Come on, that's both genius and hilarious. And if you're quite witty, you can spot a few more smart fairy tale references here too. When Karen was getting unscrewed by the jellyfish, she said, "Oh, what a world." Which is a direct reference to Queen Karen throwing some glass slippers in a glass cube early in the episode is from Cinderella. And since Snow Yellow can't get a princess to kiss him in this episode, they just make his costume as a combination of both Snow White and the prince himself. How cool is that? More than that, this episode actually had some brilliant musical aspects.
Wishing you well, wishing you well, wishing well.
Yes!
There's almost no bad singing in this episode, which is rare in modern SpongeBob. I mean, they're still not as iconic as some of the classic songs, like Welcome to the Chum Bucket, Ripped Pants, or even Sweet Victory. But again, come on! This is what we used to have just a few years ago. And some of you guys said this song is a cult classic, which I didn't agree with, but you do you. Even when we're not talking about anything related to the fairy tale references, this episode is good on a technical level. All the artwork for the world is really, really good. I heard they all painted the background design with hands manually, and it would only get scanned later for digitization. Character-wise, it's nice to see Bubble Bass having a good heart and not always being a jerk. It's refreshing to see Karen and Plankton swap roles in the relationship for once. Karen being the evil mastermind, while Plankton just hangs there telling her all the obvious stuff. They should do this more often. The only downside for the character is that they somehow managed to put Grandpat here, which I personally don't like. I mean, you still had Pearl to fill the last slot, but whatever. Again, that's just nitpicking. Yeah, I still don't know why they didn't do stuff like this more often. SpongeBob is known for not having a deliberate crossover with any IP since day one, but they love to make classic old school references like this. I guess this is the first time they covered a fairy tale, right? Oh no, actually, they did Patnocchio back in season 11, but I'm not gonna talk about that. At the end of the day, Snow Yellow and the Seven Jellies is still my favorite pick for season 14. Does this episode surpass the classic episodes? I genuinely think so. Mind you, I'm not saying this episode wipes the first 3 seasons of SpongeBob. Those were magical. However, there are still some mid episodes compared to the rest. Squeaky Boots or Your Shoes Untied are the first that come to mind. So yeah, I think Snow Yellow is better. Or you know what? I don't mind swapping The Sponge Who Could Fly with Snow Yellow for their season special. I'd take it. It's always pleasant to find a good episode in modern SpongeBob. It kind of gives us hope that Nickelodeon is still capable of making a good SpongeBob episode even after more than 25 years running. It also feels like finding diamonds in the rough, which is very satisfying. Or maybe they were always able to, they just never had enough time or resources to make a good one for every new episode. Who knows? And you know what? That's still fine to me. Making mistakes and being idiots sometimes is still human after all. I know I did. Early SpongeBob is peak comfort TV. Absurd, innocent, timeless. And Rockabye Bivalve? It seems like one of the most wholesome episodes of the series.
Since this scallop doesn't have parents, we should raise it ourselves.
Ask any millennial. They will remember this episode fondly. But apparently not everyone was having fun. To some parents, this episode crossed a line, or 3. And look, you can laugh that off, say it's just parents overreacting, but dig a little deeper and you start to realize this episode rubbed people the wrong way, and not just because SpongeBob wears curlers.
Let's have another. I don't need this.
Aw, don't cry.
Was it the fake family setup, the gender confusion, the emotional pressure, or was it something much more personal? But the real question isn't what's wrong with this episode, it's why did this episode trigger some parents? The story starts with SpongeBob and Patrick finding a baby clam abandoned in the street.
I'll take care of this!
No, not that kind of taking care of it. They decide to raise it, like a child. They bring it into SpongeBob's house, build it a crib, get it diapers, and try to feed it. Now, for starters, this episode has a really solid message for kids. SpongeBob and Patrick taking care of something small and helpless, that's something kids can relate to. It's like getting your first pet or looking after a younger sibling. It teaches empathy, responsibility, maybe even basic caregiving. Just the wholesome stuff. Unfortunately, they decide to commit further by being a couple.
We should raise it ourselves.
Oh, I want to be the mom! Just call me daddy!
And suddenly, we're not just watching a babysitting bit, we're watching a full-on sitcom family parody. In fact, the next scenes are full-on sitcom parenting montages. Picnics in the park, bathing in the fountain, ice cream dates, even cycling circus. It's all played for laughs, and for a lot of kids, that's how it landed. But for some parents, this is where they checked out. Lots of them questioned why the episode decided to go this way, instead of having them just raise Junior as friends. But let's pause. Because I think the show isn't really making a big statement, at least not about relationships or family structure. It's simply a parody, a play on traditional gender roles just with a sponge and a starfish. You've got the mom staying home, you've got the dad going to work. In fact, some people see it as progressive. A weird cartoony glimpse of a non-nuclear family actually working together, and for the first few minutes, it does work. Except the episode also sends a message that functional family isn't always about rainbows and sunshine, and they're gonna have a lot of problems in the near future. Something which parents think kids aren't ready to see, because once Patrick goes to work, SpongeBob starts to fall apart.
I'll get to it eventually.
As the episode goes on, the joke stops being they're playing house and becomes SpongeBob overwhelmed and Patrick doing nothing. He comes home, flops into the chair, and watches TV every single day. This is where the humor cuts too close. And that's the thing. Even if this was just supposed to be a joke, the joke never flips. To make it worse, the second half of the episode shifts into something darker. SpongeBob finally snaps.
Patrick Star, we need to talk.
Just one more minute.
Don't one more minute me, Mr. Man.
He confronts Patrick, starts an argument, tells Patrick that he's done nothing, shows him just how many diapers he's had to change alone, and Patrick, for once, actually breaks down. Even goes as far as saying,
"What kind of father am I?"
It's a surprisingly emotional beat. He promises to do better, to be super dad.
Great, so I'll see you at 6 o'clock.
6 o'clock.
6 o'clock.
6 o'clock.
6 o'clock.
6 o'clock.
It's a heavy moment, heavier than anything else the episode's done. And you think, for a second, maybe this is where it turns around. But no. Patrick stumbles in late that night, giggling, with a lampshade on his head.
Oh boy, that was some party. Oh, hey, SpongeBob.
His briefcase is full of desserts because his job is literally sitting in his house watching TV. So they argue again, more intense this time.
So, this is work?
You know, it's not as easy as it looks. Sometimes I lose the remote.
Some parents watching this didn't see a parody anymore. They saw a dysfunctional relationship being played out in bright cartoon colors. And that's when it really escalates. Junior the Clam crawls to the windowsill and jumps. SpongeBob and Patrick scream, panic, chase after him. It's framed like a finale twist. But think about what you're watching. A baby, abandoned, tries to jump out the window in desperation because the people raising him were too busy yelling. And for a split second, SpongeBob and Patrick actually fail as parents. Now, of course, Junior survives. He learns to fly. It's a happy ending, sort of. He gives SpongeBob and Patrick a goodbye kiss and flutters away into the sky.
Let's have another.
But what really lingers isn't the ending, it's what came before it. The argument, the exhaustion, the broken promises, the desperation. About what happens when two people try to play house and completely fail to show up for each other. It's tempting to write this off as just another weird SpongeBob episode. But Rockabye Bivalve didn't just raise eyebrows in 2002, it still sparks debates today. It was a perfect storm of misunderstandings, subtext, and uncomfortable truth. But what exactly made it so uncomfortable? Let's just say it flat out. The idea that SpongeBob and Patrick were acting like a married couple, it made some parents uncomfortable. You see it in comments like, "Alright, I don't mind the episode, but gayness isn't cool." Or, "Nah, I think they should edit out the gayness instead." And honestly, some people were just never going to be okay with it. Doesn't matter that it was a parody or a joke. Two male characters playing house triggered a knee-jerk reaction, especially in the early 2000s. Remember, this was years before mainstream kids media even hinted at queer parenting. Shows like Blue's Clues or Arthur introducing gay couples caused national backlash as late as 2019. So seeing SpongeBob and Patrick take on mom and dad roles, even jokingly, felt like crossing a line to some households. But here's the irony. The episode never makes a big deal about gender or labels. There's no romantic subplot, no agenda, just two best friends overwhelmed by a crying clam. The discomfort never really comes from the show, it was coming from the viewers. Meanwhile, the second controversy is subtler, but just as real. Patrick's role. Because when you watch this episode as a kid, you just think he's lazy. But if you've ever been in SpongeBob's shoes, if you've been the parent who stays up all night, handles every mess, keeps the house afloat while somebody else goes to work and checks out, it's a gut punch. Some people still get mad at Patrick these days. I'm not exaggerating. Even though the show is obviously playing this for comedy, the structure of the joke reinforces a very old, very real gendered trope. The selfless mother versus the useless father. And while some parents appreciated the emotional moment where Patrick finally apologizes, that moment doesn't last. He goes right back to being useless. The show never really gives SpongeBob justice. Patrick never fully owns his failure, and that imbalance never evens out. So for a lot of adult viewers, this episode stopped feeling like satire and started looking like a reflection, one they didn't want their kids laughing at. And then we hit the final twist, the moment Junior tries to jump out the window. Let's sit with that for a second. Junior, this tiny, helpless scallop, climbs up, chirps for help, and dives. SpongeBob and Patrick scream, panic, and run. It's shot like a drama. The score swells, the tension's real. And yeah, Junior ends up flying, happy ending. But some people just couldn't shake it. It wasn't just cartoon logic, it was emotionally charged. And for some parents, way too heavy. Now here's where things get interesting. Because once you start looking at how this episode was structured, the parenting tropes, the breakdown, the guilt, the fake work versus real labor, you start to wonder, what did the creators of SpongeBob actually intend here? Was this supposed to be sweet and satirical? Or did they just accidentally write the most emotionally real episode in the show's history? Rockabye Bivalve plays like a shot-for-shot parody of a traditional sitcom baby episode. You've seen it before, especially if you grew up watching early 90s sitcoms. A couple finds a baby, one gets overwhelmed, they fight, baby ends up okay, cue emotional lesson. It's straight out of Full House, Fresh Prince, even The Simpsons. The let's have another one punchline at the end? That's a classic sitcom closer, and kind of disturbing in context. So clearly, Nickelodeon was tapping into those tropes, but here's what makes it uniquely SpongeBob. They didn't resolve anything. Patrick never truly changes, SpongeBob never really gets justice, and the baby literally escapes out the window. That's not your typical sitcom arc, but here's something most people forget. SpongeBob's creator Stephen Hillenburg had one rule that guided the early seasons. SpongeBob is like a kid, or more accurately, a weird man-child, but his heart is always in the right place. So when SpongeBob takes on the role of mom here, he's not doing it to push a political point. He's doing it because he genuinely cares about Junior. That's what makes this episode work, and also what makes it uncomfortable. SpongeBob is sincere, Patrick is being Patrick. And the show doesn't sugarcoat that. It's not an accident, it's a choice. So maybe the better question isn't, what were they trying to say? It's, why did it land this way? Because satire only works when the audience recognizes the exaggeration. And for some people, that didn't feel exaggerated at all. It felt like their real lives. And that's where Rockabye Bivalve crossed a boundary. It blurred the line between cartoon logic and lived experience. With that being said, even with all the controversy, even with all the discomfort, this episode still sticks with people. Some call it their favorite. Some say it taught them more than school ever did about relationships, parenting, or empathy. Others? They never want to watch it again. And that's kind of incredible. For a show about a sponge that flips burgers underwater, this episode had weight, maybe more than it was meant to. So, did Rockabye Bivalve cross a line? That depends on what you expect from SpongeBob. If you're looking for zany underwater nonsense, a baby scallop nearly jumping to its death might feel like a step too far. Two best friends playing dysfunctional marriage? Maybe that's weird to explain. But if you're looking for something a little more layered, this episode doesn't just work, it resonates. It's not pushing an agenda, it's not trying to make some grand statement about family, it's just SpongeBob and Patrick doing what they always do. Getting way too into whatever weird role they've assigned themselves this week.
Let's have another.
It's absurd, it's uncomfortable, it's strangely touching. And maybe that's why it stuck with people long after it aired. The hate this episode got wasn't really about the content, it was about context. About parents seeing something they weren't ready to explain. About adults projecting real anxieties onto a sponge in a wig and a starfish in a tie. And maybe that means this episode did something right. Nowadays, SpongeBob loves to make episodes that feel like puzzles. The kind that mess with your head, where halfway through, you're not sure if you're missing something or if the show is. And this is one of those episodes. A 40-minute special that tries to play with SpongeBob's entire history and ends up playing with your head instead. Characters switch places, memories shift, time unravels. And by the end of it all, nobody, not even me, remembers how the world got fixed. But maybe that's the point. The episode is completely unsolvable, unless you stop seeing it as a story, but as a statement. The episode itself starts simple enough. SpongeBob and Patrick floating down a lazy river, drinking smoothies out of cocktail glasses. Nothing new, just two best friends doing something dangerously stupid. But then 5 seconds later, the ride gets out of hand, and they wind up injured. Classic. Turns out it was just another ride at Glove World called Contusion Falls. I guess that explains the injuries. But it's fine, they got what they wanted. Another souvenir photo to stick inside SpongeBob's scrapbook. They start reminiscing about the old days, walking down the memory lane of iconic episodes until they realize something's off. Every picture he flips through starts changing. The golden moments we know, the ripped pants, Neptune's spatula, the help wanted anchovy rush, all start replacing SpongeBob with Patrick's family. The photo where SpongeBob ripped his pants? Suddenly, it's Patrick's dad, Cecil. The moment he pulled Neptune's golden spatula? Now it's Bunny Star, Patrick's mom. Even the very first Krusty Krab photo, SpongeBob's first day at work, is now replaced with Grandpat flipping patties for Mr. Krabs.
It means something terrible is going on. We have to get to your parents' house.
And that's how we meet the real culprits, Patrick's reboot family. But before we go any further, I know some of you are already confused. Like, that's Patrick's parents now? Aren't they pink? He has a grandpa now? Yeah, there's been a lot of lore expansion lately. So for those who don't really watch modern SpongeBob or the Patrick Star Show, I'm just gonna lore dump a little bit here. See, back in the early seasons, Patrick's parents were Margie and Herb Star, two identical-looking sea stars we saw in episodes like I'm with Stupid and Rules of Dumb. He also had a sister, Sam Star, who showed up in Big Sister Sam. But since the Patrick Star Show spin-off, that whole family's been redesigned, or expanded in this case. Now we've got Bunny and Cecil as his parents, Grandpat as the retired maniac upstairs, and Squidina as his other sister. Yeah, I'm not kidding. This purple squid is somehow Patrick Star's little sister. Why? I don't know. But since she's best friends with Pearl, maybe it's a Pearl Krabs kind of situation. Who knows? Might be worth another theory video. Anyway, in short, we get a rewrite of Patrick's entire lineage. And once you realize the Star family literally replaced SpongeBob's history, things start to feel really wrong. Because every single photo that changes is a timeline twist-up. SpongeBob and Patrick rush to Patrick's parents' house to figure out what's happening. But when they get there, everything's already trashed. The kitchen is overrun with garbage, the toaster's gone feral and starts barking, and when they run upstairs, the family pet, Tinkle, tries to eat them. They manage to lock it up and decide to continue searching upstairs in Patrick's room, only to find out that the real culprit behind this mess is Patrick's time machine. It's called the Time Closet, a weird contraption that doesn't follow any real logic, it just does time travel. In the Patrick Star Show, it's been used in tons of episodes to send the family anywhere, anytime. But this time, it's gone even worse than you can imagine. It swallows Patrick's family, reshuffles the past, and turns SpongeBob's scrapbook into a glitching multiverse of bad memories. From here on, things only get stranger. Squidine is hiding nearby and tells them the closet has been malfunctioning for weeks. It already swallowed the rest of her family, all caused by their own shenanigans, of course. And before she can finish explaining, the closet eats her too. So SpongeBob and Patrick are now alone in a house full of broken timelines, chased by a sentient door that loves cookies. And that's just the first quarter. The next part starts with SpongeBob and Patrick trying to hunt the time closet like it's a xenomorph. They even start taking advice from a talking door named Dutch. But before he can finish teaching them about the doors of perception, the time closet eats him too. I'm not making this up, by the way. His last line was something like,
Unlocking the potential of...
Chomp. Gone. So SpongeBob comes up with a brilliant plan to outwit the time closet with a door pun. When is a door not a door? When it's ajar. And somehow, this joke works. The closet literally stops mid-attack to laugh, and then they nail it to the wall like it's IKEA furniture. That's when SpongeBob figures it out. For whatever reason, his scrapbook is connected to the time closet. Every photo that changes means someone's been replacing him in the past. So he decides, if the closet can rewrite history, maybe it can fix it too. He presses a few buttons, and the closet opens a portal to rock bottom. That's where Squidina got lost. We see her drop right into SpongeBob's old nightmare episode, surrounded by those terrifying deep-sea creatures. Except this time, instead of SpongeBob struggling to catch the bus, it's Squidina hanging out with delinquent rock-bottom teens and filming prank videos. Basically, she turned the rock bottom episode into a TikTok collab. Right when Squidina is flying with the glove balloon, SpongeBob and Patrick manage to pull her back through the closet, which somehow fixes her photo in the scrapbook. Now pay attention to that fixes part, because it's the very source of this whole time confusion that will come later. But for now, instead of solving the time paradox, they just move on to the next one. The next stop is Goo Lagoon. This is where Patrick's dad, Cecil, replaces SpongeBob during the Ripped Pants episode. He crashes a performance, rips his own pants, and somehow becomes a fashion icon. He started a fashion business called Ripped Cecil. And yeah, the ripped part works both ways now. Ripped pants, ripped body. The whole thing has commercials, runways, fans chanting his name. Then when the fame turns on him, the crowd revolts, and right before they tear him apart, Cecil rips himself in two. And then SpongeBob pulls him out of the timeline. That's 2 down, 2 photos fixed. But the next timeline problem takes things to a whole new level. In the Neptune Spatula episode, Bunny Star, Patrick's mom, takes SpongeBob's place and accidentally becomes King Neptune's royal chef. She makes boot noodle soup, poisons Neptune, then becomes the new guardian of the ocean with Neptune's trident. She literally replaces a god, and performs quite well, actually. People started to love her after she saved them from 3 consecutive natural disasters. Eventually, Neptune gets jealous, challenges her to a god-off, and loses, eaten by a kraken in front of a live audience, complete with callback jokes from the original Neptune Spatula episode. SpongeBob just casually rescues Bunny, fixes the photo again, and moves on like nothing happened. But does this mean the ocean has no king anymore? And finally, the last missing star, Grandpat. The episode flashes back to Help Wanted, except this time, Grandpat gets the job instead of SpongeBob. He gets to make a Krabby Patty but decides to sell it to Plankton, and by some cosmic accident, Grandpat ends up stealing Plankton's plan and taking over the world, launching a global fast food empire called Grand Patties. So Grandpat actually manages to execute Plankton's dream plan without fail, huh? That means Plankton's problems were always about a lack of skill. The White House? Grand Patties. The Eiffel Tower? Grand Patties. And Bikini Bottom is practically in the palm of his hand. SpongeBob and Patrick try to stop him, but fail. They get thrown in jail, and the entire world continues to collapse. But get this, somehow they're watching all of it happen on the time closet monitor before they even do it, which shouldn't be possible. So SpongeBob panics, especially after seeing Grandpat's apocalypse already leaking into the present timeline. But Squidina gets a better idea. They rewind the timeline even further to the beginning of the episode. SpongeBob gives his past self the aerodynamic spatula, tells him he's ready, and restores history. They also manage to snatch Grandpat right before he gives the Krabby Patty to Plankton. And just like that, everything resets. The scrapbook returns to normal, the photos are fixed, the world is back to the Bikini Bottom that we know. Oh, wait, they forgot about Granny Tentacles. She is now the ruler of Grannyville, commanding an army of Squidwards. I'll take that as a happy ending. Or maybe not, Because if you look at everything that just happened, lots of things didn't actually make any sense. Some of these timelines never got fixed properly, and yet all the photos are magically restored like none of it ever happened. Which means the time closet isn't just a time machine, it's something much bigger. To understand what's actually wrong with this episode, it's easier if we walk backward. Let's start at the end, the Grand Pat Apocalypse. SpongeBob and Patrick try to stop him at the end, fail, get thrown in jail, and the world falls apart. Simple enough. But here's the weird part. Before any of that actually happens, SpongeBob and Patrick are already watching it unfold through the time closet monitor. So they're seeing the future before they even cause it. How does that make any sense? They haven't done anything yet. Unless the moment they look at it is what makes it actually happen. Like, by observing the future, they just created it. Which means the closet can rewrite the timeline remotely. Basically, it's Schrodinger's episode. The timeline exists because SpongeBob watched it break. After that, there's the photo fixes problem. Every time SpongeBob saves someone, that photo in the scrapbook magically resets, like the timeline's healed. Well, that would make sense if they'd actually gone back and fixed things the same way every time. But they didn't. Only the Grand Pat Apocalypse got a real rewind. They went all the way back and stopped him before anything changed. The other three? Not even close. Think about it. SpongeBob and Patrick only caught up with those three after all the changes had already been made. Cecil's ripped pants fashion show already happened. That means there was never a ripped pants concert from SpongeBob. Bunny defeats Neptune and destroys his trident. That means SpongeBob never had a cook-off in the Poseidome. Even the ocean doesn't have a ruler now. Squidina also gets through the end scene of flying with the glove balloon, meaning Rock Bottom's version of SpongeBob never existed. Yet the scrapbook still resets perfectly, like it's cherry-picking what counts as real. So either this closet is juggling multiple timelines at once, or SpongeBob's scrapbook is the only reality that matters. Which would mean in this world, memories are stronger than reality. Once SpongeBob believes the past is fixed, the world just goes along with it. And that's when everything really starts to fall apart. Cause and effect, totally gone. Normally, time travel works like this. You change something in the past, a ripple spreads through time, you see the consequences, and then you fix it by undoing the ripple. Think Back to the Future, right? Marty changes one event and you can watch his family photo fade out. That's a timeline reacting to a change. But in this episode, the effects show up before the cause. SpongeBob and Patrick are already failing to stop him, while they're still trying to stop him. They haven't even failed yet, but the failure's already baked into reality. It's like the moment they even think about it, the future updates instantly. Just click, new universe. One possibility is that instead of working in a straight timeline, the machine works in recursive fashion. Every time they make a move, the entire timeline rewrites itself on the spot. It may have something to do with double characters in the same timeline, because technically, there should have been two versions of everyone running around in the past. I mean, if Grandpat went back to the past and ruled the world in that timeline, shouldn't they have two Grandpats there? But we've never seen both of these characters meet each other except SpongeBob in Help Wanted. It's like the world can't handle two versions of anyone at once, so it just picks one and deletes the other. SpongeBob only needs to bring the present character back to his own timeline, and then everything will sort itself out. Yeah, it's starting to get confusing real fast. So I guess normal time travel logic doesn't exist here. If anything, the only consistent rule is that there are no rules. But maybe the easier explanation wasn't quantum time physics. Maybe the answer isn't in the how, maybe it's in the who. Notice how every reset is tied to SpongeBob's emotional reaction? He looks at a photo, realizes something's wrong, the photo gets corrected, and the world resets. That means the closet mirrors SpongeBob's memory, not time. It's a machine powered by nostalgia. Every time he restores a classic memory, the universe rewrites itself to match his scrapbook. Which sounds insane, but it actually fits best in this case. The closet isn't broken at all, it's doing exactly what it's designed to do. It's keeping SpongeBob's past consistent with its nostalgia. And that right there might be the real purpose of this episode. Because now that we've realized the closet represents the power to rewrite SpongeBob's history, you start to notice something bigger, someone else who's been doing the same thing for years. Nickelodeon. But if that's true, then maybe the timeline twist-up is confusing by design, because it's a confession. You know, the more I thought about it, the less this felt like a broken episode, and the more it felt like a goodbye. I mean, there's something oddly emotional about it. Seeing all those golden memories in their original color palette again. If you strip away all the logic problems and timeline loops, Timeline Twist-Up might not really be about time at all. What if it's about memory? About holding on so tightly to the past that it starts rewriting the present? Every time SpongeBob fixes a memory, the world reshapes to match it. But did it need fixing? Except for the Grandpat one? I don't think so. He's doing it because he can't stand to let the memory go. And honestly, neither can we. The photos in that scrapbook are anchors. Each one a version of his life that we, the fans, keep trying to protect, even when it doesn't fit anymore. Maybe that's why the episode feels so chaotic. That's what living in nostalgia feels like. You keep patching up the past to look like how you remember it, instead of facing how much it's changed. And that's when it hit me. The time closet could just be a metaphor for Nickelodeon itself. Every time the show gets rebooted, redesigned, every new canon for a new audience, they're all timeline rewrites. The Patrick Star Show, Camp Coral, the modern look, each one is trying to preserve SpongeBob's legacy, but it ends up warping it a little more each time. And all those fixed photos, they're just the show trying to remember itself. Maybe that's why SpongeBob looks so happy at the end, even when we know half the world's logic has collapsed. Because from his point of view, it's fine. His memories are back untouched. His photos are normal again. The world doesn't have to make sense as long as it feels like SpongeBob. And that's kind of beautiful and tragic at the same time. SpongeBob will always be resetting himself. That's his thing. He'll always rebuild Bikini Bottom no matter how many times it's rewritten, because that's what we want him to do. We want him frozen in that perfect moment. The pineapple house, the laughter, the jellyfish fields. Untouched, eternal. But every time we do that, we lose a little bit of what it used to be. Maybe Timeline Twist-Up isn't meant to be solved. Maybe it's Nickelodeon saying, we know we've changed SpongeBob. We know it doesn't all fit anymore. But he's still here, still smiling, still ready.
I'm ready!
Try to just live in the moments, and for once, you don't have to meddle with the past. And maybe that's enough. I will always choose harsh truth over sweet lies. I know how painful it is to deal with. For a long time, I thought stoicism was just about not reacting, staying calm, letting things go, and being unbothered when life gets messy. And for years, SpongeBob felt like the perfect example of that. In the early seasons, he often finds real happiness simply by enjoying what's right in front of him. But these SpongeBob episodes have taught me differently. There are 2 episodes in the show that circle around stoicism, and they teach you through 2 very different lessons. They may look similar on the surface, but if you try to live by them, they lead you to 2 very different places. The first place this idea really shows up is in one of the simplest episodes SpongeBob ever had, the paper from season 1. The one where Squidward throws away a piece of paper and SpongeBob gives a deeper meaning to it. And when I say deeper meaning, I don't mean it in a metaphorical way. Everything in the episode comes from that one moment. Squidward steps outside, chews some gum, tosses the wrapper away, and SpongeBob says it's important.
It's only garbage.
Garbage? But Squidward, in the right hands, this paper is a gold mine of entertainment.
That's what makes this episode such a perfect starting point. There's no pressure here, and no crisis that needs to be resolved. It's just 2 characters reacting to the exact same object in completely different ways. The difference, however, would later escalate into something more crucial. Squidward calls it garbage. That's the end of it for him. And SpongeBob doesn't argue or try to convince Squidward otherwise. But once Squidward makes it clear that he doesn't want it back, SpongeBob simply accepts that judgment and moves on with his own. From that point on, the episode quietly stops being about paper and starts being about where value actually comes from. All the shenanigans SpongeBob got up to afterward, including the cape, the jungle outfit, the parachute, the mustache, even the helicopter, none of them work because the paper is special. Well, I guess it is special since no ordinary paper could do all that. But what's important is that SpongeBob isn't measuring his enjoyment against anything else. There's no comparison or no sense that fun needs to be justified. Squidward, on the other hand, is the exact opposite of a stoic in this episode. After seeing SpongeBob having so much fun with a piece of paper, Squidward just can't accept that there's a new way of enjoying things. Instead, he tries to justify why a piece of paper can't be that fun.
I'll prove to him that paper is not fun!
But of course, the more effort he puts into proving that paper can't be fun, the more irritated he becomes. What's interesting here is that he isn't actually mad at SpongeBob for having fun. Squidward is trying so hard to defend a belief. The belief that value has to come from refinement, taste, and things that look respectable. And the paper is none of that. Ironically, that belief collapses the moment Squidward wants the paper back. Once that happens, Squidward begs. He trades lint, rubber bands, furniture, his entire house, even the shirt off his back, all just to reclaim something he already declared worthless. And when he finally gets it, nothing happens. He still can't have fun with it because the thing Squidward wanted was never the fun. It was the relief he thought the paper would give him.
You can have all that junk, 'cause now I've got this!
This is exactly what Seneca was warning in one of his writings, Letter from a Stoic. He stated, "It is not the man who has too little who is poor, but the one who hankers after more." Squidward doesn't lack the paper. He only lacks the ability to enjoy anything without conditions. Meanwhile, SpongeBob is now happily enjoying Squidward's possessions, wearing his shirt, while Gary casually plays the clarinet to accompany him. This is the version of Stoicism most people recognize today. One of the core ideas from the Stoic school is that things and possessions themselves aren't what disturb us. It's the meaning we attach to them. Objects are neutral, situations are also neutral. What matters is how we interpret them. Or, as the famous Marcus Aurelius sums up in his Meditations, book number 7, very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking. Now, for most of us, that lesson about belonging and perspective is really useful. If you can adjust how you see things, you can enjoy almost anything. That does sound like a path to a more peaceful life. And it's true. I've heard people say their lives became better when they put that into application. But it's also only half of what Stoicism was originally about. Because in the original Stoic school, this wasn't the end of the lesson. It was only the starting point. The contentment works perfectly here, because fortunately, nothing in this episode actually matters. It's just a piece of paper. That's where the next lesson would step in and say, but what do you do when contentment isn't enough? Will you still be content when the stakes aren't trivial? And SpongeBob actually goes through that test in another episode called Pizza Delivery. This episode quietly puts SpongeBob through the 4 classical Stoic virtues, one by one, and tests whether he'll drop them when things get worse. After closing, Mr. Krabs receives a pizza order, even though they don't do pizza and/or deliveries. None of this is ideal, but since a promise has already been made, SpongeBob and Squidward have to finish the job. And from a Stoic perspective, that detail matters, because once you give your word, it determines what it says about your character. Notice that nothing about this delivery is their mistake, but they're told to do it, whether they like it or not. That's already the first test focusing on what's required now, rather than to keep questioning what's fair for them in the first place. Once they're on the road, everything starts unraveling in the dumbest way possible. SpongeBob obviously can't drive, so they reverse for miles and run out of gas. It gets even worse when Squidward kicks it and the boat just drives away without them. This is the moment where Squidward and SpongeBob show the differences in their mentality. Squidward treats every problem that comes after as proof the mission is pointless. Meanwhile, SpongeBob treats every problem as something to work around. One problem SpongeBob keeps bringing up is pioneer tricks.
It's an old pioneer trick. I saw it in a movie once.
It does sound like nonsense at first, but notice the pattern of these pioneer tricks. Trying to hear a boat by listening for ground tremors, moss points to civilization, rocks can move. He's constantly trying to orient himself, because that's a survival technique when you get lost, right? The methods themselves are ridiculous, but his instinct is solid. Regain direction before you panic. This is the virtue of wisdom in its most practical form. not losing sight of your objective just because conditions change. SpongeBob never forgets why they're out there in the first place. The pizza is for the customer. That's it. Everything else is secondary. This virtue becomes more explicit the moment the wind starts tearing them apart. Squidward screams at SpongeBob to let go of the pizza. It's heavy, it's dangerous, it's clearly making things worse. But SpongeBob still refuses.
Who cares about the customer?
I do!
Well, I don't!
That line is doing a lot of work. In Stoic ethics, justice isn't about laws or fairness. It's about responsibility to other people. Because, surprise, obligation doesn't disappear just because the other person isn't present or appreciative or even fair. SpongeBob doesn't know the customer. He just knows Krusty Krab promised. The hardest test for these virtues, however, is hunger. By the time they've collapsed in the sand, eating coral and arguing about what pioneers used to survive on, the pizza starts becoming a real temptation. And Squidward starts rationalizing.
Maybe we better check on it.
This is one of the most accurate depictions of failed self-control the show ever did. Because none of Squidward's arguments are insane. They're exactly what people tell themselves when they're tired and desperate. SpongeBob almost gives in, but he doesn't. This shows us another virtue of stoicism: temperance, the virtue everyone romanticizes and almost no one practices. Temperance itself isn't about never feeling temptation. It's almost impossible for humans to totally avoid temptation. But you still have to prevent that temptation from dictating your actions. When SpongeBob snaps out of it and slams the box shut, that's temperance in action. He's already decided what to do before the temptation directs him. Even Squidward, for a brief moment, understands this, until hunger overpowers him. Which is exactly the point. And finally, there's courage, the virtue that people misunderstand the most. Because stoic courage is different from confidence. It's persistence without certainty. Bear in mind, after everything they've been through, they still don't know if they will deliver this pizza on time or if the customers will be satisfied with their efforts. SpongeBob keeps going anyway, right up until the door opens and the customer explodes over a missing drink.
How am I supposed to eat this pizza without my drink?
The pizza gets rejected and SpongeBob breaks down. From a modern perspective, this looks like failure. But from a stoic one, it isn't. Because the outcome was never the measure. The conduct was. Unfortunately, this is where Squidward finally breaks, undeservedly. Squidward has been enduring this entire journey in a very different way. Unlike SpongeBob, he's holding on to resentment the entire time. Every setback becomes evidence that the delivery never mattered in the first place. And every hardship becomes justification to quit, to complain, to lash out. So when the customer slams the door and SpongeBob collapses, he explodes. From a stoic perspective, this isn't courage at all. It's catharsis. Squidward slamming the pizza into the customer's face does feel satisfying, especially after everything they went through. But it's also the moment where Squidward abandons virtue entirely and replaces it with emotion. He can't fix the journey nor the outcome now. So he fixes his pride instead. The irony itself is brutal here. SpongeBob did everything right and still suffered. Meanwhile, Squidward did everything wrong and walked away feeling justified. However, as bad as it feels now, that contrast is important in this lesson, because pizza delivery never asked which response feels better at the moment. Instead, it wants you to focus on which one you can actually live with afterward. Stoicism never promised emotional numbness. It's part of the journey. It also promised that virtue doesn't depend on outcomes. Now, this is where the difference between modern Stoicism and original Stoicism become impossible to ignore. Because if you freeze the frame right there, Squidward standing tall, SpongeBob on the ground, it's really easy to misread what just happened. From a modern perspective, Squidward feels like he's won. He doesn't let the customer's rejection get in his head at all, while standing up for SpongeBob. You could say he's being a little unhinged, but that version of Stoicism is everywhere now. Modern Stoicism is often mistreated like a coping strategy, a way to reduce stress by narrowing your concern to what you can control and emotionally disengaging from the rest. That framing itself isn't wrong, but it's incomplete from the original teaching. In the original Stoic school, emotional calm was never the destination. It was merely the preparation, or requirement to reach the real goal. Stoicism was a full worldview about how reality works and how a rational person should act within it. The concept of discipline over emotion existed for one reason, so your judgments wouldn't collapse under pressure. Once emotion stops distorting what you value, you're finally able to do the real work, choosing the right action, committing to it, and seeing it through regardless of discomfort, unfair outcomes, or lack of reward. That's why the 4 virtues I mentioned before sat at the center of Stoic philosophy. It has to remain intact even when the world doesn't cooperate. It's still baffling that SpongeBob accidentally teaches us about 2 different interpretations of Stoicism, both in Season 1, but the key lesson stays the same. Peace is what sometimes happens when you stop letting discomfort dictate what matters. In the paper, SpongeBob shows the version of Stoicism most people recognize today. Value isn't in objects, it's how we engage with. Nothing is inherently miserable or meaningful. That lesson is comforting, and honestly, it's useful in this day and age. But pizza delivery goes a step further by showing what Stoicism was originally built for: doing better as a human. Which brings us to something I didn't expect when writing this video. Sadly, unlike SpongeBob, who represents what Stoicism looks like when it's done right, there's another character in Bikini Bottom who looks calm, unbothered, and free, but for very different reasons.
But look, I've just spent this whole video on what this show threw away, and I don't want to leave it there, because for every one of these, there's an episode that got it right. Out of 20-something years and hundreds of episodes, which ones actually define this show? Not the best ones, the ones you'd carve into a cliff and leave standing there. I made a whole video answering that. It's right up here. Go watch that one next. Until then, I'll see you on the next dive.